Hello, this is Mike Diana of Boiled Angel fanzine, and I'll see you at Tampa Morgue.
What's up? This is Tony, and you're listening to the Tampa Morgue, Season 2, Episode number 56. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host from his studio deep in Tampa Bay, Florida, the one and only Angry Ed. What's up, dude?
Mr. Anderson, what's going on, brother?
Another episode, man. It's been a busy week. You know, we had King Fally on for 5 hours the other day. You know, so fucking crazy episode. Great guy, man. Ed, we talk to a lot of guys, a lot of musicians. You've been around a lot of musicians, so have I. You've toured with a lot of musicians. Is that not one of the realest dudes you've ever met?
Probably by far. And he's not afraid to answer any question you throw at him. He's legit. He's straight up. I mean, the guy's been through some serious stuff, from drugs to whatever, you know what I mean? And his life, death. I mean, yeah, no, he's real deal. He's a cool guy. I mean, yeah, like I said, the couple times I've run into him over the years, he's always been pleasant. And his band's good, man. I've seen him live several times. And yeah, it's just, I'm just going to tell you, whoever wrote that fucking, what was it, Instagram or the message on Facebook or whatever about 6
the 6
hours.
hours they wanted?
Fuck you, bro. Fuck you, bro.
Five.
This is twice. This is what happens, man, because my wife, we were going out to do something, and every time she's like, you're not going to be done in this time. You're not going to be done in this time. You're not going to be done in this time. And every time I'm like, what are you talking about? Every time I address
the show is going to last 5 hours.
Yeah, well, yeah, and they were at a concert, so they came home, and my wife was already in bed by the time I was done, and I was just like, I remember her sending me a text saying, "How much longer?" And I didn't even tell her what time we started. So, yeah, that 5 hours, that was close to 6. That was a record, though. He was definitely because Dawn of the Dead was.
It was 5, but it was only 3 recording. It was other 2 were us just bullshitting with him after the show.
Correct. This was straight up 5 hours, and that was after I had to fix several things and remove some things that happened and some stuff that just got kind of screwed up. Yeah, some editing, but it was legitimately 5 hours and like almost 5 hours in a minute, I believe, if I'm right.
Yeah,
and on YouTube I had to cut it up into two parts because they won't let you put up. it was just too big of, I mean, it was almost 6.5 gigabytes worth of stuff. That just tells you how long with the songs and everything this episode was. And it
Well,
was
I had
worth it because,
problems with the recording. The actual, not the recording, but the actual service we used to record. We used Riverside, so I never knew there was a time limit on the episodes of how before you could download a certain way. So of course, like Ed said, we go 5 hours. Well, of course the limit is 4 hours. Or then you got to like do separate tracks. It's a whole nightmare, which basically falls onto Ed because he does the editing for the show. So I just get to tell him the bad news in the morning because we're on 7 hour difference. But
yeah, you
King
didn't
was
even
great.
tell me. I looked in the Dropbox and saw the separate tracks and was like, motherfucker, man.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it is what it is, man. You just roll with it. Yeah, that was actually, that probably was the longest edit I've ever had. That took over 3.5 hours to edit that, between putting it up for Spotify and the streaming sites, and then having to cut it down because you have to convert it to YouTube, and I had to buy a new program. I mean, it was a nightmare. Now we know. So
Well,
going forward, it will be
that
cut up
is
into multiple parts, and you won't get to hear it for 6 weeks because that's how we're going to do it.
well, I tell you, that is the most downloaded in the first 24 hour show. We've had a lot of downloads. That
Oh
particular
yeah,
show was the most downloaded in 24 hours that we've had yet. And King's great. I actually spoke to King yesterday because he's like a big horror junkie like me, and I was looking for he knows a shop over in Pittsburgh that has remember Let's Scare Jessica to Death from '71.
yep.
Yeah, he was found a place that had these old one sheet posters from there, and I've been looking for one, so he helped me out with that, man. But I got to say, King, I have so much respect for him. Been a Deceased fan for many years. He's always been cool. Known him for a while, man. He's the real deal, though. I mean, you deal with even in the death metal world, there's some egos out there. There's some people that have that. They walk around like like they're in, I don't know, Rolling Stones, so to say, or whatever. King is the real deal, and he'll definitely be on again, man. Hanging out. We won't make him stay 5 hours next time because he told us his. I mean, we heard everything. It was whoever hasn't heard it, it is. He didn't leave anything out. He didn't hold back. It's a great
Mm-mm.
episode, man. Great episode. And we opened up the show with Beautiful Bert and the Luscious Ones, the song Beat Me Bitch. Obviously, Beautiful Bert passed away in 2008. Always liked Beautiful Bert, man. We talked about him on the Bloody Mess
Bloody mess
episode.
show.
Yeah, the Bloody Mess show. He was definitely a character, but wrote some great songs, man. So that's how we opened up the show with. And we have coming up, what do we have? We have, which a guy you toured with actually, 2000 you said? We have Henry from God Dethroned coming on August 20th.
I did. We did the Diabolic tour with Cannibal Corpse. It was Hate Eternal's first tour ever, with Eric, Jared, and Derek Roddy, and they obviously did not disappoint. So it was Diabolic opened, Hate Eternal was second, God Dethroned, and then Cannibal. And yeah, I saw Henry every day. He was a witness to my shit getting stolen in New York. They were a witness of some band murders almost getting taken place in Diabolic. So yeah, it was a good tour though. I mean, it was 6 weeks of, that was the longest I'd ever been on the road at that point, and that was in 2000. So yeah, it was but it was killer, definitely
Yeah.
killer. So it'd be good to
Well,
talk to him.
yeah, he'll be on August 20th. We have Tomas from Wolfheart coming on August 28th from Finland, death metal band, whoever has not heard them. And then tonight, we actually, for those wondering, we do have Mike Diana coming on tonight. And, we talked about Mike probably, I don't know, maybe like we were talking about this Ed the other night, probably like 2 months ago, maybe. We were talking about the Tampa Bay Metal Awards, Morbid Susie, and stuff like that. We talked, Mike, for all of us who are from Florida, well, not originally from Florida, but lived in Florida for a long time, Mike basically got fucked by the state of Florida. He wrote the underground comics. He was doing Boiled Angel, originally from New York. We're going to talk to him about all this stuff, but he put out this comic called Boiled Angel. Before that was Angelfuck. And whoever doesn't know, underground comics was like stuff like back in the day. It was like Skull Comics was like 70 to 72, and Zap Comics and Roxy Funnies, Purple Cat from the 70s. Just real explicit comics. And Boiled Angel was definitely, I mean, it was about as explicit as it gets. I mean, it was definitely extreme. Um, but they actually really so basically the Gainesville murders, which we'll talk about tonight, which was Danny Rolling. He killed 5 students, college students in Gainesville in 1990, decapitated them. A couple of them posed their bodies, just awful shit. Later out, they found out he killed some people and he raped them also, of course. Found out that he killed some people in New Orleans, 3 people, including an 8-year-old, and then a guy and his daughter. He tried to kill his own father. Danny Rolling was a piece of shit. But basically, they came down on Mike Diana, and then when they found out that it wasn't him, because he was a suspect in the murders because of the comic Boiled Angel, they basically decided to go after him anyway, man. And just, like I said, we're going to talk to Mike about all this. And I don't see many interviews with Mike, and I'm telling you, Ed, I feel like they erase a lot of Mike's history.
I believe you're
Like,
correct.
yeah, like we put something on Instagram and it dropped. It told me that it dropped down our post because it was inappropriate. So Mike has had a target on him. He still does comics. He has a page you can go to, which he'll give us all that information tonight. I mean, just the fact that he drew a comic, right? And basically, like, I'm gonna just mention this before we'll hear all about the whole story from Mike. But just think about this. So you're drawing, you're doing artwork. Okay, artwork. You're not hurting anybody. First of all, you're a suspect in the murder. But then you get away. Then you get off on that. Then you get 3 years probation, $3,000 fine, $1,200, 1,200 hours of community service. You have to go to like 1,200 hours of psychiatric evaluations. What else was there, Ed? Random searches of his home, so he wasn't drawing. He wasn't allowed around minors. I mean, what the fuck? You
Yeah,
know?
it's no offense, government overreach. It's a bitch move, but I mean, unfortunately, that was how many years ago, and look how shit is today. When you allow that to happen, they just create more and more ability to take away your rights, and that's what's happening, and that's what happened to him. He had his rights taken away over being able to draw. I mean, and I don't say this to be political or hate, but like, people in Europe or of different faiths draw Jesus in pretty shitty ways, or death metal guys draw Jesus all decapitated and strung out, deicide, whoever, and you don't see people getting canceled for that. But somebody drew something of Muhammad, and remember what happened with that. They got fucking absolutely crucified, destroyed, dropped, almost arrested. And it's like, at what point is one thing you're allowed to draw, but you're not allowed to draw something else? It's either you can do it all or you can't do none of it. It can't be there's only certain things you're allowed to do. I mean,
You would never
you know,
think that would happen. When you hear his story, which he's gonna tell us tonight, you would, I don't know, it's just outrageous what he dealt with. Like, I
right.
would be ashamed if I was, the judge was Walter Fullerton, who died actually in 2022. He was the one that basically stuck him. He didn't have to actually do what he did in some of the ways, but tried to really screw Mike. um, and then there was the state attorney, Stuart Baggish. There's a lot of, I mean, it really is insane what
I
happened to
think it was
him.
trying to make an example out of
That's
the
what it
guy.
was. Yeah.
That's, I mean, say, hey, don't do this, or this is what's going to happen to you.
But
And
think
and
about
it's
this. Without that, Ed, would he have gotten his? Would his name be known like it is? Like,
no,
it's good. It worked
no,
out for
no, no,
him at
no.
the end of the day.
I mean, look at some people who've written music and got ostracized, or a movie. Remember when Mel Gibson made that voicemail to his ex-wife, and
Oh yeah,
hope you get raped
yeah,
by a pack of whatevers, and
yeah.
blah blah blah. And that went, and remember, for a long time, Mel Gibson was hated, and then all of a sudden, they remember that he's Lethal Weapon dude, and he's the guy that made, the Christ movie, um, and
The
he's a
Road
great actor.
Warrior.
Yeah, man, and he's a
You know.
great actor, and he's a great director. So people make mistakes, man, and if you can't honor the fact that a lot of people make mistakes, um, and he didn't kill anybody. You know what I mean? I mean, if you kill somebody or you do something
Well,
to
he
a
was
child,
blamed. He was blamed for it. It's
well, he
I mean,
was,
that's
but I'm talking
insane.
about, like,
Yeah.
people
Oh,
who
Gibson. Yeah.
say things or do anything. If you're not touching kids or hurting animals, or a domestic abuser, you know, give me a break. I mean, there's people out there doing shit that need to be put in jail and or be letting out and then killing people. You know what I mean? So I
It's
think we got a fucked up system. Stop worrying about the shit that doesn't matter and worry about the stuff that does.
Well, I'm glad he came on because, like I said, I haven't seen him do much press wise and stuff like that. And me and him went back and forth for a little while and got it set up. And I will say, anybody, which I doubt anybody that tunes into this show is going to be oversensitive, but I'm like, there's the comics, definitely, there's rape in them, mutilation. I mean, anything you could think of. It was pretty much it's extreme as it gets, and
Right.
Boiled Angel. But like I said, I think if you're tuning into this, that doesn't bother you, and it's a comic, it's artwork, it's expression, and he totally got a raw deal. And we're gonna go over all that with him, man. And I'm looking forward to talk to him. Like I said, it's gonna be, and it has a lot of Tampa ties, and it has a lot of Largo ties and St. Pete ties. And I actually lived like down the street from the dude, basically. Like it's in a lot of the Brass Mug. He was a guy who circulated all these places, Club Detroit and stuff like that. So anybody from our area in Tampa and St. Pete and that stuff like that, Pinellas County, because Pinellas County is basically the one. It was the Pinellas County Court in the Sixth Circuit, I believe it was, that really screwed them. But yeah, Michael, come on and tell us all about that. Ed, you have a lot. I mean, you've had an interesting week, and it's and obviously you got some other stuff coming up. But man, I'm glad you're with us tonight because
Yeah.
you know
Well, I
you
mean,
went to the
obviously, yeah, I'm not. I wasn't like it wasn't recent, but I mean, yeah. Go ahead, you can tell it because
Yeah,
it's
Ed went to go get his hip
crazy.
check. Ed's getting operated on next week. And Ed went to go get an EKG, which I just had one of those. This age, I had to get one here over in Europe, so I got one. And Ed went got one too. And Ed got some pretty disturbing news, actually.
Yeah, weird news, man. Apparently, I had a whole echocardiogram done last year, just because my primary said he heard like a murmur, and I did have a heart murmur when I was a kid, which was one of the reasons, like when all the vaccine shit happened, I was like told not to do it because they were worried about heart conditions, and but I never thought nothing of it because I'm like, man, there's been no occurrence since I was we're talking like born to 6 months. That's when they heard it. But yeah, apparently now again, my doctor's kind of foreign, so he's got a weird kind of accent. But I had an EKG in 2015 too, apparently, and I don't, he kind of lost me, but somewhere along the line he said during one of those two EKGs that it appeared that I had either a heart attack or a stroke, which I was like, well, never got that phone call. Usually if that happens, somebody would call you and say, "Hey, we got a little bit of a concern here."
Angry Ed needs to calm the fuck down.
Yeah, well, apparently it wasn't. If it was major, he said it could have been while you're sleeping. Who knows, man? Who knows, man? But typically he said, hearts don't bounce back. But he said my EKG was for this surgery. He's like, dude, I'm clearing you. You're good. Um, Apparently working out and getting my health and my eat, what I eat
And
and
you've been doing
cleaning
that
up.
for a while, man. You've been busting
I
your
have
ass,
been
Yeah,
since
you've been.
probably like, realistically, I started working out hard when Bryce left for college in 21, but there were still times where it wasn't consistent because, you've always been consistent. But then when he came home, we started getting consistent in 22. And then I think when I went on that tour with Monstrosity, me and Mark made it a point to go to the gym in every country and every city we visited. We went more than we didn't. We were just paying drop-in fees and going to gyms, and it was killer. But when I got home, I think that's when my life really took a turn because I just I knew I was hurt. I thought it was my back, and then later we found out it was my hip because I've been dealing with that for well over a year. It was
Yeah,
before
it's
that
been a
tour,
while.
and it just got to the point to where I just kept working out, even doing legs, and it just got to the point where I'm like, I can't do this. And then that's when they gave me the good news that I had to have the hip replaced. So, and we're doing that on the 29th. And I'm honestly, I'm I haven't looked forward to nothing surgery wise, except maybe getting rid of those nasal polyps because those things absolutely
Yeah, I
they
remember you were
tortured me
suffering
for
with that
10
too.
years. But this is probably going to be the most um, satisfying thing I've probably ever done because I will no longer be in pain, and I fear for everybody when I get done because I'm going to go absolute fucking ham, and they're gonna, whoever talks shit about how I look will will not be
It's gonna be
happy.
doing backflips. But you are actually, before this happens, before you go in under the knife, you'll be this weekend, right? You'll be playing
Yep,
San Antonio, Texas, August. I don't know
yep.
what day are you guys playing? Because I know the festival is
Saturday.
16th, 17th,
We're playing
Saturday.
Saturday.
And
Yep.
what, Nasty Savage, Whiplash, and Ed? We
That's who. Yeah,
love to
we're
get a
playing with.
Whiplash band on this. One of the
Yeah,
maybe Tony on the show.
I'll listen, man. I remember watching them on the cruise, and they absolutely. And that was in 2012 when I saw them. I mean, I got up at 10 o'clock in the morning to go watch them,
Yeah,
and
Jersey band.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
love them,
Whiplash,
man.
one of the best. Wicked Angel, Dismember. I know there's a bunch more bands playing with you.
Yeah, this members playing Friday night. Hopefully, we'll be there Friday night, so hopefully we get to see because we couldn't really watch Dismember at Maryland because it started raining, and I was like, yeah, I'm not standing outside in this, in this crap. So we wound up not watching them, but we
what's the
also
name
knew
of the
we were playing.
festival?
It's the New York Death Metal International Fest. I mean, which is weird. It's the NYDM International Fest, but it's in San Antonio, so I don't know the whole ins and outs of how that works. But I know they've been doing it a long time, and I know I've seen bands playing there over the years. Um, and from my understanding, it's pretty killer. So yeah, get that done.
You
Have a
see
week
Ed?
to
Say hello, everybody, because Ed will be
yeah,
there.
man. Have a week to after that to get my life in order, and hopefully Joe Hubar's not taking my spot when
Joe,
I don't wake
Chicago
up and
Joe,
when I don't wake
Chicago,
up from surgery.
Chicago Joe. He's chomping at the bit. And before we get to Mike, we're going to get Mike on the show in a few minutes. I did see, which we just before we did the show tonight, me and Ed were talking a little bit, and I did see that Swarmfest released the lineup. And I know we read a lot of the lineup the last episode, but I saw that Vincent Crowley was finally announced. Ed, you want to tell us what you see on that
Yeah,
flyer
yeah, I'll
and the
give you the
dates and
line.
all that stuff?
So from what I'm seeing, Friday, November 22nd, I'm just going to go from the top, which I'm assuming is headlining down.
So it's 22nd till the 24th, right? Because we're playing on the
Correct.
23rd. Okay.
Correct. So we got Pessimist, Kelly's band. We got Lethal Prayer, which that one came out of nowhere. I didn't even know that Belial was still doing that.
I think
Uh,
Nick's playing with them too now, actually. Good year.
oh, well, yeah, maybe so, because I know Angelo was the drummer for a long time. Cordia from Hialeah, San
Grodia.
Sithanis, MRSA, and then Grave Rot. And let's see, man, some of these names I
Druid
don't get.
Lord. I know Vincent
Well, I
Crowley
know this
band.
is Friday. This is Friday. Ars Antigua, Formulus, Sadistic Vision, and Tunnel of Set. I don't know. I've never heard of
I
these
am my
guys.
buddy Joey's band. Yeah, I know Tunnel Set.
Okay. Then Vincent Crowley on Saturdays headlining Nocturnus AD, Perdition Temple, Promethean Horde, Druid Lord, the almighty baddest motherfuckers on the planet, Generic Christ, Hybridus Mortis,
It's our
Vacuous
first show
Death,
since when, Ed? Since 2016, man. And it's the Taste of
18.
Death lineup,
18.
2018.
Oh, but since the TOD lineup, yeah, that was
Yeah.
15 or 16. Yeah.
And Mug was probably 17 since we played there, the Brass Mug. So I'm
Oh yeah.
definitely, and it's my first time in Florida in like 2 years. So it's going to be awesome.
Let's see, Vacuous Depths, Voldrium, and the
Virulence is playing too, I know.
Noctambulant, and then Sunday's Nasty Savage, another band that I didn't see when they rolled around. Narcotic Wasteland, Interceptor, Sorcerer, our buddy Josh, Virulence, Impurity, Sadistic Forest,
Ejaculator,
Ejecutator,
yeah,
yeah,
Alvar's band. That's
Sacratus,
cool.
and Reptilian War Machine. So yeah, good lineup. Happy to be
November
playing that.
22nd through the 24th, right? That's the
Yep,
actual dates of the festival.
yep. Be happy to be playing that thing, and thanks, Nick.
Yeah, man, and we're gonna have a special shirt for that show for the band, for our band, Generic Christ. That's the artwork's killer, man. We had Ipiot from 5 milligrams do it again. So yeah, I'm really excited about
And
that, man.
I didn't even. I was trying to keep this a secret, but I heard that there's a. You probably heard of the Todd. That sells the sex toys.
They're,
You ever heard of that place in Tampa?
no,
That's
I
around
do
the
know what it
corner
is.
from
I've
the
heard of it. Yeah,
yeah.
but I don't know it.
They donated a strap on for you for the show to
There you
wear
go.
with a
Hey,
giant purple one. So
I guess I could leave mine at
listen,
home then and not fly with it overseas because that would be a
well,
pain
yeah,
in the
that's what we
ass.
were trying to do because you got stopped the last time in security, and I don't want you to have to explain yourself. So,
I know,
but
and it's actually that's perfect. That's a perfect lead into the next song. But we're gonna we're gonna we're gonna have Mike Diana on here about in the next couple minutes. But we're gonna get Mike Diana set up, and we're actually gonna play Gigi Allin, Antiseen, Violence Now from '91. And we're actually, I know Mike has some Gigi Allin stories too. So yeah, it should be an interesting show, man. I'm glad he's on here. Like I said, I
by
haven't
the way,
heard.
let
Oh
I'll go
yeah,
ahead and do it. And let me give you a disclaimer that if anybody is offended by what's going on with this guy or what he says,
I did
realize
that.
you're
I think.
listening. I don't know if you did or not, but you listen at your own. We don't hold back from people. We
Mike's
don't,
honest, man. He's not going to hold back either.
well,
Mike's going to say,
Just like
yeah,
King, we don't tell people what to say or what not to say. And sometimes people say words or phrases or things that may not make you happy but unfortunately we live in the country that's got the words freedom of speech, and we don't infringe on that with people. Now if they say things that are absolutely hate speech or something like that or negative, we're gonna cut it off. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, there are certain words and things that if people say it, we're going to shut you down. But if they're talking their experiences in their lives, just realize that, you know, these are people telling their stories. And who are we to shut them down from being honest? Like I
and
said, within
Mike's dealt
reason.
with enough too, man. He's been drugged
Yeah.
through he was drugged through the dirt back in the day, and there's a documentary about it. We'll talk about all that stuff with Deanna.
And we're playing Gigi Allen, so you should already
Yeah,
know what's coming after the bloody mess, show. You should pretty much know what's coming. So we're just letting you
yeah.
know that.
And actually, Mike used to be pen pals with Bloody Mess because I actually spoke to Bloody Mess yesterday, and I told him that Mike's going to be on the show. And he's like, "Oh shit, I used to write with Mike back in the day." And I said, "Well, it's funny you say that, Bloody, because me and Mike were talking about that when I was getting Mike all set up for the show and everything. We were going back and forth, and yeah, he used to write with Bloody. So it's like a big family circle, man. But
Let's just
it's
get it going.
yeah,
Some
it's going to be
Gigi Allen
awesome.
for you guys.
Yeah, some Gigi Allen, Antiseen from the '91 album, and the song is called "Violence Now." And we'll be back on the show with Mike Diana after this track. See you back at the Tampa Morgue after this.
Welcome to my world, a battlefield blip. It's as real as it seems, and bloody as it gets. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We need more sons to fight our war, and people to defend our battle score.
was Gigi Allen and Antiseen with the song "Violence Now," and we are joined by Mike Diana. How you doing, man?
Well, pretty good. Doing well.
Cool, 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 man. We, we're me and you were discussing a little bit before the show. We actually did an episode. We were talking about you. We were talking about the old Tampa Bay Metal Awards and stuff back in the day, and we started discussing you a little bit, and I was like, this is probably what Ed, maybe like 4 months ago, 5 months ago.
Mm.
Probably not
The
that long
Tampa,
ago, a couple months when we did the Tampa Bay Metal Awards. Yeah, a couple months, maybe 2-3 months ago. Yeah,
yes, we brought up Mike, and I remember saying like, oh, I should try to get him on. Well, it worked. I got
boom.
him on, man. Yeah, I got him on. So we appreciate you hanging out with us tonight.
Yeah, definitely. Good to be here.
Yeah, and before we do anything, Mike, you want to? What's your webpage? Just so we'll say it at the end of the show too. But let's promote your stuff right away here.
It's Mike Diana Comics. Mike Diana, and then comics spelled COMIX.com.
There you go. And Mike's got a story that I'm looking forward to tell, man. Because I don't think I'm sure a lot of younger people probably don't know the story. But first, before we get to that, we'll mention. I know for the metal crowd, you've done some album cover artwork too. That we just had one of the guests on recently. You did. I know you did stuff for Chris Reifert and Autopsy. You did the Ridden with Disease compilation 2020. First of all, how did you get? Was that something that the label contacted you, or did you speak to Chris?
That was somebody named Roy in New Jersey, and I don't know, was he distributing it or what he had to do with it, but he was working with Autopsy, and I had done some drawings for his fanzines and stuff, and he said, "Hey, do you want to do some Autopsy, art?" And I said, "Oh yeah."
Listen, I know you did stuff also for I don't know metal wise. I know some of the bands that you might have done stuff outside of that too. But I know 2002 you did the Fornicator. You did some artwork for that, right? For the self titled release.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then
There was a Fornicator, and were they called Whore at one point? Or
yes, yeah,
yeah,
that was an unfinished business record you did the artwork for.
yeah.
Yeah, when you see that album cover and knowing your artwork, it's like when I see that cover, I could tell it's definitely your artwork. That one,
Oh,
because they're Portland. I think they're out of Portland, right?
yeah.
Yeah, because Rob Fornicator is the vocalist in Horror, and then obviously Fornicator, so that matches.
Mhm.
And you did what 2004 Knife Through Head.
Oh yeah. Knife Through Head. That was a
Okay,
good one. Um, Iron Monkey, I think, was maybe 1998.
and that was the Our Problem record, I think it was called.
Yeah, the big um, crucified gorilla on it, like a crucified ape. And I had done, they asked for a pencil sketch first. I sent a pencil sketch, see if I'm going in the right direction. And they said, well, just leave the graphic stuff outside of it's going to be a fold out cover. So I have the graphic stuff not actually on the front cover because they want to sell it at Walmart. So when you open up the fold out kind of poster, you see the crazy stuff. But I originally didn't have a penis on it because I didn't know if I should hold back or not. And their one complaint was like, "Hey, where's the big monkey dick with a syringe stuck in it?" I said, "All right, I'll add that in."
Yeah, you did that. You did. You also did the split for Agoraphobic Nosebleed, right?
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
what
that's right.
2009. I think it was 2009.
Yeah,
And Under
yeah.
Gang.
There's been like a lot of bands, some T-shirts. You ever hear of one? Akron was from Florida, kind of like Satanist type music.
So did they get a
Asheron.
hold?
Couple T-shirts for them.
Yeah, we had Vincent Crowley on here from Asheron, actually. Yeah, we know Vincent.
And also like kind of like punk bands. Hunchback. This one called Hunchback. I knew him from New Jersey, and like I did a few covers for him. Um, Seems to be like there's bands really that not many people have heard of even, and they just ask me to do stuff. So I'm like, all right, I'm happy to do it.
do most of them give you like exact? They give you some like rope to what you kind of hey do what you want to do, or they just or
Um, Seems like a lot of them have different ideas for themselves, which can be kind of detailed because someone in your mind you can easily think about, a million things, but you have to think about how it's going to fit into the process. So, but if someone is paying me, I try to hit all that stuff, and they're like, all right, well, I want the clan is getting killed by this, and this is happening, and then there's a spaceship crashing, like all this stuff. I'm like, all right, I'll try to fit all that in, but it can get a bit crazy.
did you enjoy working with bands, or you're more into the comic book world?
Um, I always liked working with bands for sure, because it was kind of like, ideas they would have that I necessarily wouldn't have come up with myself, um, like the Iron Monkey, and they just, had me go with an idea, and then it kind of comes to life, and it's nice to send the artwork when they see the finished version and they just like really like it and whatever. Um, so yeah, it's a nice feeling that when it comes together.
You did some movie posters too. You did a movie poster for Frank, right? Did Frankenhooker, Basket Case. You did a promo for him for one of his a viewing of some old of what was it? Which film was that you did work with him with?
The first one was a poster for Bad Biology. It was a screening. I don't think they had shown it really on a big screen, so they had it at Film Anthology in Lower East Side, and they asked me to do a poster, and that was, I guess, the video company that was putting it out. And I said, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll do that," and got to meet Frank and everything. That was fun.
Nice. Yeah. So like I said, I think a lot of listeners may not know your story. I know some do because when I put up that you were going to be on the show, there was a lot of people who actually were glad to hear from you. And I was telling you before we started recording too, is it seems like a lot of your history has been erased off of some of like I look, it's just not available. Like they pulled it off the internet. Some of the stuff, man. It's
Yeah, they're trying to erase me.
yeah, it's odd, but so we'll start
Yeah,
out from the beginning, man. So you were born in New York, right? So you were born in what actually town were you born in?
there's a small town called Geneva, which is like near Seneca Lake, near the Finger Lakes.
A lot of farmland over there, right?
Yeah, I mean there was a big college there, and Geneva, felt like it was an interesting kind of small town, but definitely kind of like a dying town. And now there's like been a resurgence in the past years, but I just remember it being very cold there. A lot of snow in the winter. It was kind of like right in the snow belt, they call it. So I'd be walking to school, it'd be like snow up to my waist.
Yeah, I
And
remember those areas definitely get cold as hell.
yeah, but I had a lot of fun, as a kid. I mean, we lived right down the street from a cemetery. So I'd be playing around with my friends in the graveyard and everything.
Nice. And you had what? So you had a brother and a sister. There was three of you, right?
Yeah, I was the oldest one, brother and sister.
Okay. And your dad was a scientist.
I was a science teacher at a school, I think 10th grade.
Okay. And your mom was she was a stay at home mom with you guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was nice, she would show up and well, I'd get home from school and she'd have like fresh cookies waiting and everything. And so yeah, it was nice. I mean, it was kind of like in my mind at that age, it was kind of like a perfect life. It felt like, we have a house and I have cookies when I get home from school, and it seemed all right. I had lots of friends. It seemed like my parents were setting up play times with people and whatever. And my mom gave me ballet lessons, more like gymnastics and ballet. But that was kind of weird, because when you're a kid, you always feel like you're being forced to do certain things, maybe, or you can't decide if you like it or not. Um, but it was exercise, and my mother was into jogging and running, so I'd go running with her. We had like a route we would do, like a 3 mile run, even at that young age, like 7 and 8.
And you're about like in the same age bracket as me and Ed, and I know with the artwork and comics and stuff. For us, we always talk about this on the show more than I thought we ever would. You were also around during the time of Saturday morning cartoons when they were still relevant, because basically I
Oh,
think
yeah.
60s through the 90s. I think the 90s were kind of the death of the old. You remember how it was? You wake up in the morning on Saturdays and
Yeah.
you went to the TV. What was some of yours? What was some of the stuff you were watching back then that you actually found to your liking?
Um, well, we had all the UHF channels, back then. I mean, for the longest time, we didn't have cable because my father didn't want to pay for it. So I had the UHS channels, UHF. But of course, they had the cartoon hours, which was all the old Bugs Bunny and, those kind of Warner Brothers cartoons. And I
Tom
liked
and Jerry.
those because, yeah, like the Tom and Jerry and Woody Woodpeckers, they had, I mean, the stations are probably just getting all that stuff for free or really cheap, they just keep running them. But what I liked about that is I would find some of the weird ones, like the racist parts in them, and like the things with like Hitler and other representations of World War villains and stuff. And I knew at a young age, these weren't really made for kids. This is for adults, and now they're letting the kids watch them.
Especially those Bugs Bunny ones. You always saw some shit in there that was always they've taken a lot of that stuff away now where you can't,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, they've
Um,
gotten rid of a lot of stuff. The Tex Avery stuff I liked because it was really twisted, weird kind of stuff. And another one I liked was Ultraman. The original
yeah, I remember that.
Ultraman
Yeah.
show. The
Yeah.
Three Stooges. I used to wake up at 6:30 in the morning so I could spend a half an hour to watch the Three Stooges on TV before I went to school. And I'm someone that likes sleep. I hate getting up early, so it's kind of funny to think about it. How I used to wake up early, but I had never seen a lot of them back then. So I would like watch Three Stooges. You see a lot of them you've seen, but then you see a new one that you haven't seen before. So then I'd go to school happy about that.
They used to run that and the Little Rascal. I remember like those were common shows when we were kids. You would see like Little Rascals or Three Stooges, and it
Yeah.
was normal to see that on TV. Now I don't even know if they play those anymore.
I mean, probably somewhere, but not like they used to, for sure. The Flintstones, I used to watch that. I'd come home from school and had to watch Flintstones, and there was one. It was a cartoon called the Pac-Man cartoon.
Yeah, God,
That
haven't.
was just horrible. I mean, I got it on DVD some many years ago, just because I was like, "Oh, I'll watch that again." It's almost unwatchable, But as a kid, you just like it's animated, so you're just gonna sit there and wake up at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and
I
they're just like giving you something in between the toy commercials.
It's funny you say that. We were talking, me and Ed, about like I remember Fraggle Rock, and then when you see it when you're older, you're like, man, this sucks. But like for some
Well,
reason back then, it like sucked you in.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
um,
definitely.
but
Hanna
how about
Barbera too, same thing.
yeah, Hanna Barbera,
Yeah.
man? They actually, if you remember, they were blamed for. We talked about the violence thing. They were actually like blamed for excessive violence back then, but that's why they pulled a lot of that
Oh,
because there
right.
was Tom and Jerry, Mumble, Grape Ape Show.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, they actually blame that for being a violent thing back then. As a kid, you never thought that. Like Bugs Bunny would blow someone's head off. You didn't really give a shit.
Yeah, I'd be
Yeah,
watching it. There was
Yosemite
one
Sam.
where um, Yosemite Sam with his guns
Yeah, it's
blowing people away. Um, I was watching one, and it was like at the end, Tom and Jerry both sitting on the railroad tracks because they're going to commit suicide. They were upset about these girls that they lost. And I was just watching it, kind of giggling, and my father's like, "What? That means they're going to kill themselves?" over a woman, and they just had their divorce, my parents, so he was sensitive about that. And
They'll
I
be
was like,
back next week. Don't worry.
yeah,
you know, how about comics? I figure 70s, 80s. That was like I know you were into like the creepy magazine and all that stuff. Eerie, which those they didn't carry
yeah,
the seal of comic. I think they like got away with a lot of stuff, but those ones though. But what were some
yeah.
of the ones you were into at a young age?
At a young age, I was started getting into like well, when I moved to Florida, we had lots of yard sales and flea markets I would go to, and I found some of the ODC horror comics, and really like those because they were so like over the top, even though they were older, it felt like it was more explicit than the horror comics that were at the on the newsstands at the time. We had this place called Paperback Palace, which was like a used bookstore, and the whole basement was nothing but comics, like just thousands of comics to look through. Like you get to the door leading to the basement, you just smell that comic smell. And so I got into ones like the original Swamp Thing from the 70s. I got all those issues. I got one called Plop. Remember if you remember that, but like the Basil Wolverton covers, always like these twisted creatures on the cover. And
You into like the Tomb of Dracula or anything like that?
yeah, definitely some superhero stuff, but not as much as like the scary kind of stuff. But what kind of changed it was I started getting Heavy Metal Illustrated. This was like 83, 84 when I was like 13, 14 years old. And you could buy them, you didn't have to be 18 to buy them, even though it was like an adult illustrated magazine, they'd call it. Um, and so in one of those issues, I saw a little advertisement for a underground comics grab bag, Kitchen Sink Press. And it's had a little coupon. You had to sign your name that you're 18 or over. So I did, even though I wasn't 18. Sent it in with like $6. And I had heard about underground comics, but I never knew how to get them. So I got them, and there was a catalog for other stuff. And I just kind of went crazy buying like as many underground comics as I could. And of course, they had nudity and, stuff like that in them. So
You were
it was
into art young, right? Like you were. It's since pre. What was it like? Your parents had put you into a art school. But you were like in a preschool, pretty much, right?
well, that art, there was like an after school art class that was probably like kindergarten, first grade, like, yeah.
And they
Pretty
asked
young,
you.
yeah.
Did they ask you to? So they asked you to do a portrait of your family, and then you pissed them off because you basically you drew your family basically with no clothes on.
Yeah, that was in kindergarten. The class assignment was to draw our family portrait. And I think at the time I was going through this kind of wondering about nudity because I had found my father's Playboy magazines in his closet, and my mother gave me a whole talk about, nudity and whatever, and nothing to be ashamed of. So I guess that was still in my mind. And they're like, all right, I drew my family naked, genitals and everything. And then the teacher came over my shoulder and kind of said, oh, where's the clothes? And I kind of felt embarrassed. And I erased all the genitalia and put clothes over them, but there was still indentations from the pencils. So at open house, all the kids had our portraits hanging up for the parents to see. And my father was laughing. He said, oh, did you draw us naked? And I denied it. I said, no.
And you were also well, you had another project, right, where you were supposed to. I guess it was like a beach project, and
Oh, yeah.
you were supposed to. I guess it was like use stuff from the beach, and you used trash and a dead fish.
Yeah. These stories are known out there because we actually used them in my defense in court. Um, I had to come up with stories, reasons why my art was going in the direction it did. And the thing with that school assignment was we went to Seneca Lake, which was really polluted at the time. There was a lot of like trash around the lake, like broken glass and these like weird plastic things that seemed like they were from like a factory, like dumped there or something, and even like little dead fish on the shore. And of course, all the kids were picking up the seashells and the nice things, but I was picking up the broken pieces of stuff and a little dead fish. And so we had a plastic bottom cut off part of a milk jug, and you put the items in there, and then you pour the plaster on top. And then when the plaster dries, you take it out and you see the face of it with all the shells, and you have a little hook on the back to hang it up. And again, where you hang them in the classroom, for open house, and they had to get rid of mine because the fish was decaying and it was like that dead fish smell in the classroom. But I felt like at an early age that I was making a statement with my art, that art doesn't really have to just be beautiful, it can portray something. I felt like at the time I was disappointed to see this litter on the beach and that I couldn't really do much about it. And I just wanted people like to be aware of it, even if I wasn't totally aware of what I was doing at the time. Thinking back on it, I felt like that's what it was. And of
And
course,
you're a
it's just
peaceful
those
person,
open.
right? People who don't know you, that you're a pretty chill dude, right? You never, you don't hurt nothing. You never were, even young, you just were a chill guy.
Yeah, I try to be. I leave all the yelling for the comics, like the artwork in a way.
Do you remember when you first learned what death was as a kid? Because that's always an overwhelming thing when you're a kid, when you actually realize that you're going to die and your parents are going to die and everyone's going to
Yeah.
die. Do you remember when you actually first got that?
Um, I think it was when we moved to Florida. I was 8 years old, and were in New York. My grandparents on my father's side always lived in Corning, New York, which is pretty close to Geneva. And Corning's where my father was from, so we drive there to visit the grandparents. And then we moved to Florida, and my father got a phone call one day, and he couldn't say, I hung up the phone, and he just started sobbing, kind of. And my mother said, "What's wrong?" And he wouldn't answer, and she's screaming, "What's wrong?" And he said, "My mother died. He just got the news." And I remember that's where I started really feeling like, seeing his reaction. And like, then I started thinking about, well, my parents are going to die someday. But I don't really feel like I got that upset. When I really got upset about death was my um, first pet was a tarantula. My father had got me, and that died. And I think I probably cried for about a week or maybe even longer. You know, so sad. I mean, it was like crazy, the emotion of sadness I had when the tarantula died. And I had a big funeral for it, so I made a little coffin, and buried it out in the garden. And I remember my mom hugging me as I'm crying. She's saying, "It's not fair. It's just not fair." And you think like a relative died.
Yeah. You had a tapeworm collection too, right? Growing up.
Oh yeah, tapeworm collection. That was from my father. He'd given me lots of specimens because he was a science teacher. Um, Little glass bottles, with different tapeworms, like hundreds of different ones.
And you were so, and also one thing I've read about you is that you were so you're baptized Catholic, right? You and your brothers and sisters and stuff. But you
Yeah.
obviously you did never liked religion, and when you used to go to church, um, you just hated it, right? I mean, it just made you.
Um, in New York, it wasn't so bad, because they had like you're in an old church, so it's like interesting to look at the stained glass windows and whatever. Um, but when I got to Florida, I was getting older, and the church was very different. It was more like fire and brimstone attitude, and um, very like I don't know, dry, like what the word is for it, but or
Is that
like
in
a
Largo?
to it.
Because I know you moved to Largo. Well, actually, I lived in Largo, right, a couple streets probably from where you were. Was that church in Largo?
That was in Largo, St. Patrick's Church. Yeah.
And you also, were you not a fan of the Jack Chick, right? The cartoonist, the American cartoonist who did the little handouts.
Yeah, I was a fan of that. I had a interesting story, my discovery of the Jack Chick books. Again, at a younger age, like maybe 9 years old or 10. And we had next door to our house was a larger house. It was 2 stories, so they had apartments they would rent out. And there was this couple there that were like drinkers, probably drug users. Um, they moved out, so I got to raid the trash can, and I found nudie magazines, a lot of empty liquor bottles. I found a marijuana pipe that was a turkey leg or like a chicken leg holding the bowl. I didn't really know about drugs, but I was like, oh, this seems like like one of those weed pipes I heard about in school. So I kept that. I kept some of the stuff. But then mixed in with the nudie magazines were those Jack Chick comics. And I was like, what in the world are these, Started reading through them and I was kind of like blown away. And I realized there was some religious thing about them. And in my mind, I thought, well, I guess these people that moved out discovered these Jack Chick books and they like cleaned their life up. They threw the pipe away. They threw the nudie magazines away, which probably really wasn't the case. But, in my mind, I was thinking that. So I decided to write to the Jack Chick address. It was on one of the little books. And I kind of made up a story. I said that I had been addicted to, I think I said, oh, I'm 42 years old or something like that. I've been addicted to drugs and alcohol and pornography for most of my life. And then I brought up the story about finding the Jack Chick books in the garbage with this other stuff, and that it must have saved these other people, and I read the Jack Chick books, and now I'm turning my life around. And I even drew like a really purposely crude drawing of Jesus on the note and had an arrow pointed to, and I wrote, "He saves me. He saved me." Jesus. And then I said, well, can you send me some more of these Jack Chick books so I can give them out to my friends because I want to save them too? And I got a huge box in the mail. I mean, it might have been like every one of each copy of each one they put out at the time.
And these are like 3x5, right? They're like
Yeah,
small little handouts.
small ones. And some of them are pretty wild. I mean, later on I was thinking about it, and it kind of like the message that they have in some ways is like, well, if you give up this way of life and turn towards God, you're going to be taken care of. But I later on wondered, how many people like gave up that stuff and then they didn't get anything panned out. I mean, are they just going to go deeper into depression?
Are
Because
you already
some of this.
drawing by them?
At that age, yeah, I was drawing, not more like sketches and drawings in school. Like I had little characters I'd make up. Nothing necessarily obscene. Like I like to draw spaceships and that kind of stuff, weird aliens and stuff, monsters.
And you mentioned moving to Florida. So before that, right, in school, you actually were doing okay in school. But then when you moved to Florida, was that kind of like everything changed for you a little bit? Did you feel like you
Um,
fit in, or was it like a whole different world?
it definitely was like a different world. Like the school in New York, I mean, it was a small school compared to Florida, a small town. And in New York, I had like certain speech problems. Like I would say spoon, I would say passoon, like the P before the S. And they actually had like a person I would meet with for like a little bit each day in school that would help me through these kind of speech things, like a specialist, because they don't want people to really fall behind. I mean, if you're getting bad grades, they figure, oh, we got to help you. In Florida, I was in the middle of the fourth grade, so already it's awkward going to a new school and you're in the middle of the school year. Um, And it seemed like the academics were higher in Florida, like in math class, we were like doing plus and minus, and then they get there and they're doing fractions, which I had no idea what that was. And I quickly started getting bad grades, D's and even F's, except in art class, I got straight A's. But, no one ever came around and said, hey, why is this kid getting these bad grades? It's kind of like, well, you just get left behind.
Yeah, it was.
And also, what else was different about the school? Like Largo, you're talking about still in 1978. That's like a small town, and it had this
Yeah.
influx for them was kind of new of people from up north and Ohio and wherever moving to Florida for a better life. And there's not a better life there. That's the only problem. Um, in school, it was like every school teacher had their own personalized paddle. Like they would make them in wood carving class. They had their names carved into the paddle proudly. Some would have holes drilled in the paddle for wind resistance. Some guys would have like paddles with rulers duct taped to them. I mean, every day I saw like violence. And in that school, what else was different was they had prayer in school. I mean, they weren't even supposed to be doing that. They'd have the Pledge of Allegiance, and then they'd say, and now a moment of prayer. Um, that was fourth grade. By the time I got to middle school, they actually took that prayer thing out. They said, well, now we're going to call it a moment of silence. You can pray if you want. You don't have to pray, but you're allowed to pray. So my mind was wandering, in a moment of silence, and I started thinking of this joke that I heard. I started giggling, and this guy that was kind of a bully right next to me gives me a dirty look, and he says, "You were laughing at me because I was praying." I was like, "No, no, I wasn't." He's like, "Yeah, you were." And like, how do I read his thoughts? I mean, I didn't know he was praying, but evidently he was like a religious bully. Um, Luckily, nothing ever came of that, but it
Was
was
that this?
definitely weird. Weird change from New York to Florida, and quickly I got to hate, Florida schools.
And you said middle school, so that's probably so. You came across a. Is that the same time you came across a book about child abuse, right? And it kind of like caught your attention. It was like, it
Oh
was.
yeah, yeah, Largo Middle School, which again I can mention was probably the most craziest fighting school that I ever had been to. Violent, bloody fights between the students and whatever. And the school library, I would just look through the shelves looking for books, seeing what was there, and a book called The Battered Child about child abuse with very graphic depictions and very graphic pictures. They were like crime photos, basically, of even dead children. Um, and that kind of shocked me because I think I had never seen real photos like that. You don't usually see dead child photos. And they were black and white photos, they weren't color. Um, but still, that kind of shocked me. And I had my first one of my zines, early zines called Angelfuck, named after a Misfits song by the same title.
Was that the first band you really got into?
No, they were one of them. When I got into punk music, I liked them. Um, but in that first issue, I actually reprinted those graphic child abuse photos in a section of the book, the zine, without any kind of description or anything, just kind of like for shock value.
Did you know, like at that young age, when you started doing? Well, I know you got into. You became a horror fan, right? Because your dad got you a membership card for a video rental place, one of the mom and pop places, I believe, over in Largo or Seminole.
Oh yeah, I begged him to get me, go in there and give me permission to rent the rated R films, even though I was underage. The parent gives you permission, you can rent them. But she constantly was um, threatening to go back there and tell him not to rent them to me because he saw what I was renting, the cannibal movies and all this crazy stuff.
I was going to ask you, one thing I had heard, which I found really interesting, was because it actually went into your comics eventually. Your dad didn't hit you guys, but he pulled your hair, and that actually influenced some of your artwork.
Yeah, yeah, his thing, because he was a school teacher, he knew ways to abuse without leaving marks. That was the idea. So you can pull a kid's hair, it's not going to leave a mark. He had stories of like grabbed one kid by the shirt too hard, the shirt just ripped off the kid. And when he had his open house where the parents could come to the school, the parents had the ripped off shirt with them. And he thought, oh no. But the parents were laughing about it. They're like, "Yeah, good way to go." They were like for it.
Where's your
And
paddle?
my father said when he would catch the kids chewing gum, he would make them stick it in their own hair. I'm like, God, Dad, you were brutal.
And so
But
you would actually draw cartoon characters, right, with the hair missing.
yeah, yeah, that was like one of my characters. The kid with the hair, clumps of hair out, and my father was always telling my mother, when she was complaining that I'm doing something wrong, she'd say, "Grab his hair, yank his hair," and one day my mom actually did yank my hair. Guess it was the first and only time. And I ran away from crying. She realized she had my hair in her hand, a clump of hair. Um, and then she came, I went upstairs crying and I did a drawing of my mom with a brown crayon all over her face. And I wrote, "Mom is a poop face," or "Mom is a poop head," something like that. And had it laying on the floor. I was on the bed crying still, kind of sniffling. And she comes in and starts apologizing to me and hugging me. And I look down and I see the drawing on the floor. And I remember with my foot trying to kick it under the bed so that she wouldn't see it. And I think she glanced down and saw it, and then I was like, felt bad about it. I'm like, oh,
And
but
you
yeah,
said,
it was crazy. I mean, my mom definitely wasn't into hitting, but sometimes my mom would freak out. Like when us kids just got to be too much, we were probably doing stuff wrong, but she would just be chasing us with a belt, swinging at us and whatever.
you mentioned the horror movies. Like, what was some of the ones that you got? Because you were into some of like I know a Color Me Blood Red from '65, but like, were you into like the Blood
Yeah.
Feast from Herschel Gordon Lewis and stuff like that? The real.
Yeah, definitely. The mom and pop video rent was called USA Video, 99-cent video rentals, and
What road was that off of? Do you remember?
um,
'Cause I remember there was one off
I think it was
Starkey, but I
that
don't think it was the same.
main road, where the Sunshine Mall used to be on.
Okay, yes.
I'm trying to remember.
So there was Olmerton over there, US 19, Park
Yeah, it
Boulevard.
might have been Omerton, like the same one the Largo High School was on.
Yeah.
Like you just go down there past the high school and you get to the video store. Um, but yeah, back then I didn't have any kind of way to research films really, and I hadn't heard about these films or anything, so I would just look at the box and think it looked interesting and I'd rent it. Um, so it was all those Herschel Gordon Lewis movies, like Pink Flamingos
Yeah.
and Female Trouble and
Divine.
those. I definitely got into those because they were just so off the wall and divine. Um,
I remember when I saw Pink Flamingos for the first time, I was very young. And that kind of scars you, the chicken scenes and shit, when you're like very young. You're not used to that.
yeah, definitely.
I mean,
Yeah, but yeah,
so
I like those horror films, and I would show them to my brother. So my father, he got mad because I'm showing him my younger brother, and he had a whole time he brought me aside. I don't like the way those are affecting your brother, possibly, and just don't show him those bloody ones, But he really saw like the Herschel Gordon Lewis as actually being real gore. I mean, we're laughing about it, we're watching it. So right after that speech, he comes in my room and we're like watching Color Me Blood Red, and the woman just got the knife stabbed in her
yeah.
eye. She's backing away.
blood is so
Yeah.
red that you can't even.
Yeah.
It's like paint.
But my father, that was like real. I mean, it just shook him like somebody really getting killed, I suppose. And he was like, "Oh my God," and just ran out of the room.
In '86, you start working at Winn Dixie. Oh, I guess you're working at Winn Dixie, I believe it was, right, in '86.
Yeah.
And you used your money to buy a video camera, where you started making your own gore films with your brother, your sisters, your mom, and
Yeah.
everything. You,
Let me just say one thing about the videos I was renting. I wanted to mention, I used to get all those different horror films and sit through them. And there was one that kind of rattled me. I had never seen it, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I put it on, I'm there in the room alone. Everything's quiet or whatever. And I started getting tense, as it goes on. And then the part where he kills his first victim and he slams that metal door shut.
yep.
It's kind of like a whoosh sound. I had to get up and turn it off. I mean, it really kind of freaked me out that much.
Which is funny
But
because that's the least bloodiest. If you think about it, the blood
well,
in
yeah,
Texas Chain, and I get it though because that scene is jarring, man. It's just that sound he
yeah,
makes when he comes out of there too. Oh, it's like
yeah. I was used to like the silly stuff, I guess, and then I got this one thinking, all right, I'm gonna just get through this one, and it was different than I expected.
that's a great film though. Still, it's funny you say that because I still find that movie to be eerie though. Like just
Yeah,
watching it, the sounds and like the obviously the bones hanging up. There was just something about that movie that just
yeah,
you thought it was real kind of because they tell you it's real when you're a kid. It's like based on a true story, because I guess it is based
yeah,
on Ed Gein, but um, that's a great
yeah.
movie though.
But with the Winn Dixie, I was getting a whole 3.35 an hour. That was minimum wage at the time.
Wow.
And then they would take stuff out with hold, so what was I getting? Maybe $2 an hour. And but I saved up, and went to this place. It was called Hall's Appliances. um Got the camera, $1,300 for a Magnavox Movie Maker, it was called. It's a VHS camera, big tape. um Even paid extra for like the extended warranty thing. By the time I tried to take it back for the warranty, I went back to the place. It was out of business, of course.
Hmm.
Um, but I had been inspired about trying to make those films from seeing the horror films, like the Herschel Gordon Lewis ones. I mean, some of those even feel like they're homemade, even though they're on film. And I was thinking, oh, I can do this kind of stuff. But it was all friends in the neighborhood, my brother and his friends. So yeah, I just like started making my own horror films, and we
Is,
were just like having fun with it.
and at this time, are you starting to actually stay up at night? I know you were like making the comics about. Was this about the time you start really getting diving into this?
Yeah, like 86, I was a year away from graduation, and so in 87 I was 18 and I graduated and I got my first car. And that's really when I guess I started to live a life outside of school more. Um, because like I go to see concerts, I always wanted to see shows, bands, and so I'd do that, and I'd go to the movies and take like road trips, and but yeah, I was really like, getting into at home. I had my everything set up, my own VCR. I had a little refrigerator stocked with bottles of sodas and my comic books and a bunch of candy. I was kind of set, I felt like. And reading the underground comics, I was just inspired to do my own more graphic stuff, but also around that time, I kind of got addicted to watching the TV news each night. And in Florida, that was like stations at that time were competing to be like the most goriest stories, it seemed like.
Oh,
Like they
definitely.
wanted to top each other. That's how you get watchers, And later on, they like changed it where like they have at least at the end they have supposedly one nice story. But at this time, when I first started, they didn't even do that. It was like hearing all this crap, and I kind of felt like I had to get it out of my head or something. And that was like part of what started it, the Boiled Angel. I mean, before that was Angelfuck, but that's what brought my art to that
Well,
type of
and you
caliber.
and you were, did you know, like, I know what, 87 before you graduated, right? You were in high school and you drew like a thing an artwork of like the teachers being murdered, right? And you handed it out to the students, and I think you sent it to some magazines and
Um,
stuff. Were you trying to shock, like, is that what, did you want to like piss people off, right? Was that kind of something that you thought about at that, starting even in 87 when you were finishing high school?
I think so, definitely. Even though I probably didn't realize it at the time. I mean, I felt like I was very rebellious against school and just kind of institution, and Florida in general. But in my last years of school, I actually skipped many days of school. I would go to the video store instead and get like 4 or 5 tapes. One day, my father was driving by, and he saw me on my bike with the tapes in the basket, and he just screams out as he drove by, "Why aren't you in school?" I'm like, "I got tapes to watch. I got horror movies to watch, Dad. It's my education."
Was this the same period you were having trouble with night? Because you dealt with a lot of nightmares too, right? At a young age?
Yeah, I mean, the nightmares probably had them my whole life, but that was more when I was really young, when I was like maybe 6, and maybe even earlier, but 5, 7 years old. Around those ages, I had a nightmare I'd have often, and that was falling from a high place, and I would feel it in my stomach, like that feeling of falling, like on a roller coaster. And I could swear right when I would wake up before I'd land, I would be bouncing on the bed like I landed. And like one night, I looked out the window before I fell asleep, and I saw an airplane, the airplane lights in the air. And I just thought to myself, oh no, now I'm going to have a dream that I'm falling out of an airplane. And of course, that night I did. Um, and some of them I still remember from that young age. One of them was kind of creepy as my best friend, Chris, at the time. He had a punishment, so he had to sit in a high chair, like a baby's high chair, but it was a high chair that seemed to be like a mile tall. And I remember just looking up at him, and he was crying up there, so it's like his tears are like raindrops, and I'm thinking like, well, how am I going to help him get down? Um, my father, he sometimes used to like to play practical jokes on us. He'd like to scare us, so sometimes I'd have dreams even about my own father, like turning into a monster. Um, but then later on in life, my dreams, they get to be more about like serial killers or something. I mean, more disturbing things, even.
You used to mention those comics. You were the underground comics too. Like, what were you, so like? I know Zap Comics, right? S.K. Wilson, because I know he did some stuff in that at one time. Skull
Yeah.
Comics, Roxy Funnies, and stuff. Was there anything that you really like? Did you have any favorites out of the
Um,
batch?
I liked the Skull comics. I liked Greg Iron's stuff and Rory Hayes comics and S. Clay Wilson, of course. Um, yeah, I liked the titles that were more like horror comics, Fantagore, like the Richard Corbin stuff. He was doing like some interesting covers and things. Weird Sex, Cocaine comics, it was like drug comics. And I remember taking a stack of the underground comics to school once because I thought, well, people will think this is cool. And the one kid saw it and he says, "Cocaine comics, that's drugs." I quickly realized these are too special to show any of these people.
You weren't into drugs, were you? Really? Were you like? I know you experimented, but you weren't like when you would draw. You weren't like someone who was wasted all the time when they were drawing and stuff.
No, I didn't do any kind of drugs. Like, I got drunk once when I was 18, but I didn't start drinking until I was 21. That was the legal age. Um, and, I was never a drug user until later on. I think I didn't start smoking marijuana more regular until I was like, really, it was the court case, and I started smoking more because I just felt like I needed to relax.
You were also into the wacky packs, right? They had the monster cars, the creature features, or you had the
Oh, yeah.
um,
Yeah, that started with the ugly stickers back in like 76 when I was in New York. My father found them at the little convenience store. And the ugly stickers were those monsters with someone's name on them. Um, and they were 10 cents a pack. And no matter how many packs he brought me, I felt like I wanted more. So, I would actually sneak out of the house because I knew how to walk to the convenience store. And I'd by myself walk there. And I had stolen some of my father's dimes. They were silver dimes. That's why they're in that drawer. They were sterling silver. I didn't really difference them from a regular dime. And I went to the store and I would buy a couple packs. I did that probably a few times. And then once the woman behind the counter said to the other woman, these are silver dimes. I guess they were holding on to them. He got into his father's coin collection. But then, of course, after that was the wacky packages. And but the time when I was in New York, also at that young age, there was these ones called Horror Heads by Fleer, and those are like little temporary tattoos, like monster heads. And I'd have those on my forehead and my arms and whatever. Um, and then during the pandemic recently, I ended up getting some of the horror head designs as real tattoos. I got 6 of them on my arms.
oh, nice.
I just felt like I always wanted to get them. I found them on eBay, the whole series of 40 different tattoos.
Now
And
you'll have them forever.
yeah, got them forever.
Yeah, you know,
And of course, Garbage Pail Kids came out. I was older at that point, but still I liked those kind of collecting stickers and stuff. So I got into the Garbage Pail Kids for a bit.
and your first comic. So was around '88, right? You and your buddy, I guess Robert, worked at a print shop in Largo.
Yeah, my friend Robert Roots, what was interesting about that friendship, we met in high school. I don't remember how we met even. Um, I don't think we had any classes together, but we became friends because he was from upstate New York, the same as I was. And all we would talk about is how much we hated Florida and we just wanted to get back to New York someday. And so in 1988, we were both had graduated and he worked at a print shop in Largo. And the owner told him that if he wanted to print his own book, that he could just pay for the paper and the ink and could use the printer and whatever free if he did it not on work hours, on his own time. And so we started doing this. We called it Heavy Wyam, if you had to say it. Really, we couldn't agree on a title. We kept arguing about a title. And I had some of these, again with the stickers, I had on my wall these stickers called Nutty Initials. And they were like really old and rare, like ones from the 60s. Just kind of like different creatures shaped in different letters. So you could spell things out with these stickers. And I didn't have enough letters to spell anything, so I just put them in this, like, on my wall in like a plastic sleeve. And so my friend Robert, he points to that and said, how about that for a title? It wasn't even a word. HVYUM. And I was like, all right, I guess that's the title. Something that nobody knows what it says, what it means. It doesn't mean anything.
Well, you guys
But
did
I know
960 copies, right? Of those?
that one we were doing 500 copies, and some of them got screwed up during the printing. We like lost some of them, misfolds or whatever it was, misprints. I would say there's probably like about 450 of those were in existence originally. And, we didn't know how to sell them or distribute them or anything. So I put a ad out in Fangoria magazine, a small classified ad saying something along the lines of weird horror comics, um, $2 per copy, maybe like $1 postage. And I sold maybe one or two copies through Fangoria, not many. But one of them was from this guy named Bill who lived in Atlanta, Georgia. And, I kept in touch with him. And then when I did Angelfuck, I sent him a copy of that. And he
You
said,
did that the same year, right? 88?
yeah, same year. And, he said, well, have you ever heard of Fact Sheet 5? He said, there's this contact zine that you send your zine to this contact zine called Fact Sheet 5, and they review your zine and print the dress, and people write to you. And so I did that, and that's when actually I started to like get some, correspondence. And so those first zines, that was like 65 copies, um, each issue.
And you were also, in 88, you were also doing the janitor work, right? At the school?
88, yeah, I started a job as a janitor. It was actually, they don't call it janitor, they call it maintenance coordinator. I don't know, something weird thing like that, because they don't want to say janitor. But it was in a building which was not actual school with students. It was where they decide what kind of textbooks to use and stuff like that. It's all secretaries, different offices. And my mother worked there. She worked for the social studies department, and that's how I got the job in the school system. Actually, was from a good word from her. Um, so yeah, I started working there. It was a part-time job.
And you're doing the angel fuck at that time. And angel fuck was like a lot of mutilation, nudity, right, and stuff like that, and violence. And were you
Yeah.
taking this from like a lot of, you mentioned the news stuff. Were you like pretty like with that? Was it a lot of your surroundings and what you were seeing that you were like basically trying to really focus on all the fucked up shit out there?
Um, you know, I mean, I'd say that really heavily came about, probably showed more in the Boiled Angels than the Angel Fuck, maybe, even though it was the same time period. Like when I started the first zines, I was really trying to do like my version of an underground comic, like mixed with like the EC horror comics, and not so much like real life serial killers and stuff like that. I still wanted to be more like fantasy and whatever. But as I got into the Boiled Angel, it kind of really was more turning into a serial killer angle, like more like human monsters and drug abuse and a lot of anti-religion. I realized that I could try to cleanse myself of all the church I was forced to go to through my zine.
And when you were doing the in '88, that's when you left. So what was it? You left. What is the story? So you had like some pages you left behind in the school when you were doing the work there, and they found them, and that's how.
Um, well, all the zines I made after the Heavy Wyam was in a print shop, but then the Three Angel Fucks and the Boiled Angels I was doing at my job, doing it on work time. And, I worked at night. Everyone would leave, would go in the copy room and start making copies and make my zines. And I was even drawing the drawings for the Boiled Angels on work time, because I had so much downtime. And I'd clean the rooms really quick, and then I'd just draw and print, So I felt good, like, okay, I'm getting paid by the hour. At that time, I was getting like $6.50 an hour. So I'm getting paid by the hour to do my drawings, is how I felt. And, it was going pretty good. I was printing all the zines. I was printing Boiled Angels. I was on my number 6 issue of Boiled Angel. And they had gotten a brand new copy machine in the copy room. So I'm making copies of the cover. Actually, it was the back cover of number 6. And one of the covers got stuck in the machine. So I tried to open it to clear the paper jam. And I realized it was a new machine. It was locked.
Did you know
So
you
I
were
needed
fucked?
the key, to get in. Never locked before. The old one wasn't locked, So I figured, well, the key is probably in the drawer of the desk. There's a specific woman that would run the copy room. Well, her desk drawer was dropped. Her desk drawer was locked too, I didn't even know if the key was in there. Maybe she had the key on her key ring. So I'm thinking, well, should I just break open the side of the, I'm pulling on it, deciding if I should physically break it open. Find it that way, but at least I'll get that copy out because I had my name on it. I decided not to break it open. I figured, well, I'll leave it there, and they'll just maybe clear it and throw it away without looking at it, was my hope. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention, actually, that I had gotten transferred to a different building, and so before I left, I made copies of the keys of the old building so I could go back and use the copy machine there. So I'd go back at like 2 a.m., I wasn't even supposed to be on the property, but I had my own keys, so I'd go in, be making copies. So it became more of a big deal than I expected. What didn't help out was that, I went back and was making copies again, and this woman came in, she happened to be working late, and she knew my mom, and she said, "Oh, you're helping your mom making some copies?" I said, "Oh, yeah." But she got a glance at some papers of one of the images and, realized it's not something my mom would be having made for the job. I didn't know she reported it. So, I thought everything was fine, and then the supervisor showed up. And it turns out that the building I was transferred to, somebody had recently stolen like $10,000 worth of computers, new computers that were supposed to be for schools, turned up missing. It was an inside job. I didn't know anything about it. But the supervisor of the building shows up and he says, "Oh, I need to collect any keys you still have to the old building." And I knew what it was about. And I said, "Oh, I don't have any keys to the old building." And he says, "You got to be in my office after work today." So I had to go to this other location, talk to this guy. Basically, I had, the woman had reported me. There was a whole investigation going with the campus police because they kind of have their own school police to look into stuff.
What was some of the content on that she saw, you think, on that one? What would you remember what the pages were that on that
Um,
particular one?
I remember the one that got stuck in the machine was like the back cover. So I had like this kind of a weird creature with a big winding dick that was coming, and it had my name on the bottom. Um, but when the teacher came in that day and saw the stuff, it was actually someone else's submission, which was like a woman, like it looked like a dead woman with a python wrapped around her body. And that disturbed her when she saw that. So the campus police were, questioning me. I don't know if you ever happened to see Seinfeld. There's an episode where,
Oh yeah.
Jerry has to return a library book that he's had for like 50 years, 20 years or something.
Yeah.
And the library police cop, that was exactly like this guy, his mannerisms, everything.
Kept on showing up at his house and
Yeah, he showed up at my house even. I got out of my car and he was standing there and he says, and they already asked me questions about the stolen computers, but he would just say, who stole did you steal the computers? No. You know who stole the computers? No. I'm like, all right. So there was a big investigation, and they told me that if I didn't quit the job, they were going to proceed to get me fired. Now, if you get fired, you lose your vacation pay. I had like $600 in vacation pay saved up that I didn't want to lose. So I agreed to quit. Well, I had like a month to change my mind. I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, I don't want to quit. I should make them fire me if they can even fire me. So one of the things that officer told me, though, he said, well, if you try to fight and keep your job, we're going to charge you with trespassing because I wasn't supposed to be on that property. And so I decided anyway to try to fight it. So I showed up to this kind of courtroom setting. And as I'm walking in, that officer was there. And he says, what are you doing here? And I didn't say anything. And I went into the courtroom type building. And he follows me in there. And he was standing up against a wall watching. And they had like a guy that was a prosecutor type guy. And so they were asking questions. Well, what did he do wrong? Oh, he was making illegal copies. I was always told that the teachers, the workers there, if you make a personal copy, you can pay for it yourself. So what I claimed is that I intended on paying for these copies, which I didn't, of course. But that's what I said. And then, the woman, kind of like judge, playing the judge or whatever, she asked a question, well, how many copies was it? She's like, well, we're not just going to fire him for making illegal copies. And then in that point, the guy had mentioned, oh, well, it was, this graphic material or something. You know, so then as retaliation, the campus police, they had me charged with trespassing. So
that's how I
I got a
got you.
summons in the mail to plead guilty or not guilty for trespassing charges. And they were trying to screw me on that because I wanted to get a public defender and fight that, but they said I couldn't get a public defender because there was no jail time involved. And I guess they did that on purpose, so I couldn't get a public defender. It's good there was no jail time involved, but they're not going to put you in jail anyway for a first offense like that. Then I went to a lawyer. I realized how much it was going to cost me to try to fight it to keep my job, and I just gave up, and pled no contest to the trespass charge. Had to do some probation, pay a fine. But, another interesting little thing is my aunt, my mother's sister, worked at a kindergarten. And, like in the 80s, this is pre-internet, but in offices, people would make funny Xeroxes. Like you have a funny Xerox, you'd make copies of it and you'd pass it around, you'd hang it on a bulletin board.
The meme before memes.
Yeah, there was always some with like nude children, which I thought was weird. Like, oh, you broke yours off. You can't touch mine. You already broke yours off, the boy says to the girl. So my aunt is in the teacher's lounge, and one of these security guys for that school throws a piece of Xerox in front of her and says, what do you think of this one? Laughing. It was that copy that I left in that got stuck in the machine. A copy of that copy with my name right on it. Because, they had access to it. And he's like, oh, this is a funny one. So my aunt looks at him and says, "Where'd you get that? That's my nephew that drew that." She knew about the problems I was having. She said the guy just was like, "Oh," and like ran out of the room, Oops. Because now they're like bringing this material into kindergartens, basically.
And who are you at that time period? Because, like, you said you did 65 of the first, but then you did 300. Because I know the second one was featured in the on the fact sheet 5, right? It was in there.
Oh
Your
yeah.
your second boiled angel. So, like, how many are you moving at that time, and who are you getting letters from? I know you sold some to Russia at one time, and you were getting from, but not really Florida, right? Not so much that area.
Yeah, not so much in Florida. I mean, probably maybe like one in Miami or something, but really no one in Florida, got a hold of me, was interested, especially not in my own town. Um, I'm thinking like issue number 5 of Boiled Angel was like 150 copies. I kept going up. Really, I would print them just slightly, a number slightly over how many people were interested in it, I felt. Like how many orders I would get. And let me see, like, I think by the time I got to issue number 6, that was 150 copies. And number 7 was a jump to 300 copies. Number 8 was 300.
And and is this the same time you saw? I know you were. So you went and saw Gigi in Tampa, right? Gigi Allin. Was
Oh,
that
yeah.
because I know he played at. He was supposed to play at Arts Alive. I think that show got shut down, and it was. I don't know if you saw him in '91 or you saw him in '89 because he played at the Harbor Club, right, in '89.
Um, the one I saw was Club Spacefish. That was actually after Boiled Angels. That would have been, trying to remember exact year, maybe 93. No, maybe 92. I can't remember exactly.
Because he actually did the Carnival of Excess album. He was actually recording some of that in Tampa. I know he did some shows
Hmm.
there. So he was. So when you saw him, was it one of the full fledged Gigi Allen shows? The whole defecation on the stage and
Oh, yeah, it was nuts, definitely. I went with his friend Steve, who was a major G.G. Allin fan. I knew him in Sarasota. And so we drove to Orlando, is where the show was, called Club Space Fish. And they had like a crudely made sign written on the door that said, "If offensive things disturb you, please do not enter," something along those lines. And so me and my friend, we said, well, from seeing, he had a big Gigi video collection of different shows and stuff. And he says, well, it seems like Gigi gets pissed off if you run away from him. You're afraid of him. He gets pissed off like you're a pussy. So we're like, well, no matter what, we're not going to run. He starts throwing shit, whatever. We're going to stick there. And of course, we're both up against a wall, like petrified. He comes out totally nude and finishes a beam bottle, smashes it over his own head. The blood's pouring down his face, and he's punching his face with the microphone. And at another point, he's sliding down the bar, like throwing the bar glasses, smashing them on the floor. And the place had these big music posters and these glass frames hanged up. He grabs one of those and smashes it to the floor. There's these big shards of glass, and he's rolling around in the glass. And he starts throwing shards of glass through the air, hitting people. One guy had a big gash on his chin where had to get stitches. Um, and the security guy that worked there, he's quickly taken the other posters down, taken them to the back room so those don't get broken. Of course, the whole band is on stage naked. Now, no one ran when the glass was flying. They're still watching. But then he squats down and he has diarrhea. He's trying to poop in his hand, but it was diarrhea. I could see, I was close enough where had a side view and I could see his hand down there. I could see the diarrhea was going into his hand, but it was slipping through his fingers because he didn't have his fingers together. I'm thinking, well, cup your hand, you catch it, But that's how close I was. And then he realizes that it was on the floor in a puddle rather than in his hand, so he's trying to pick it up. You're trying to pick up liquid. But he got enough in his hand where he was going to throw it. That's when everybody ran out of the place, I'd say over 50% of the crowd or more is just out of the front door. And me and Steve are up against a wall still. And he's flinging the diarrhea, but then he gets mad. He's like, "You pussies, you're all running," and he's grabbing bar stools from in the bar and like throwing them out in the street at people. And there just happened to be this African American bar across the street. And of course, they're all outside, like, "Oh, look at this crazy white person with all the blood and everything and covered in poop." So evidently, they called the cops. And at this point, Gigi had come back in, and they're not even halfway through I'd say, the concert yet. And this flashlight comes on. It's the police. As soon as they realized the police were there, they all quickly disappeared backstage. I think just so they could put clothes on, so you don't have to go to jail naked. And they leaded Gigi away, out to the police car. The whole band was arrested. And the story I heard was that right before the cops got there, someone tore that sign I was talking about, like a sign that said something about offensive material. They tore it up and got rid of it because that's like an admission of guilt that they were claiming they didn't know what he was going to do. And so we're outside, the guy is holding his gash, the one that he was proud of it. He's like, "Yeah, I got my first Gigi Allin scar." The police left, and then the black people at the bar started chasing all the punks. Everybody had to run, it was like a crazy scene. And the place was closed down and became an Indian restaurant.
We actually had Bloody F Mess on probably about, I don't know, maybe what, Ed, like 4 weeks ago or something. And actually, Bloody's the first one to buy the X-Lax. The first time Gigi ever did it on stage, Bloody's the one that got him the X-Lax and got him hooked up and talks all about it, man. It goes on pretty much detail. I guess Gigi took the X-Lax way too early. So the whole day he was trying not to shit himself.
God.
Yeah, but we had that whole episode on, Bloody was telling us all about that. And and it's like I said, we're all from the same, like we all live in the same area. We're not, me and Ed are both originally from New Jersey, but I lived in Largo where you lived over Starkey Road at one point. So you were there. So 1990, we cover a lot of metal on this show. And I know you were around during when basically the Tampa Bay metal scene really started kicking, right? When the Deicide put out their first record or Atheist and stuff. What do you remember personally about them? Were you going to like Aces Records at all or, Asylum or anything like that?
I would sometimes go to Alternative Records. I think it was called Alternative in Tampa. And there were a few spots I would go. But really, I'd see those guys even performing at like house parties. Like I'm thinking like 90, I don't know, like 92, maybe 91 even. Just going to a party and Morbid Angel would show up and they'd start playing, And Deicide, I'd see them hanging out, drinking and whatever. Seems like those parties, every time that a fight would end up breaking out, someone would seriously get hurt. That was another weird thing. But it was fun,
Were you going to like the Brass Mug and stuff, or what was were you into that kind of metal, or what was your thing back then?
I went to Brass Mug. I saw Antiseen there a number of times, different bands at Brass Mug. A lot of skinheads there. I don't know if you remember back then.
Yeah, Ed's talked about that a lot, about those old shows with the skinheads and stuff.
Yeah, crazy with the Nazi skinheads. The worst show I went to for like that stuff was at the Cuban Club in Tampa, or I think that was in Tampa, right? Or was that with St. Pete? But
Cuban Club's over in Tampa.
Yeah, so I went there and
it was Ybor City. Ybor City.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ybor City, yeah. It was Social Distortion, Sick of It All. I mean, a bunch of these kind of bands, and I saw the security people like saying to each other, all the security is at the football game tonight. We're like short on staff. I saw several fights break out with like dozens of skinheads beating on one person. It was horrible. Um, and they couldn't do much about it. The police got called in. The Whichever band happened to be on, he stopped playing and he starts screaming like, "Stop all this fucking fighting! We're here to make music," or whatever. And somebody jumps on stage and starts fighting with him. And that was the end of the show. The police came in, they closed everything down. Um, yeah.
Was there any Tampa bands that you really preferred, or like was there personally was there any bands that you liked the most out of all those Tampa bands
Um,
in the '90s?
you ever remember Megma Smegma or something like that?
Yeah, yeah.
There was like these weird kind of bands that I kind of like gravitated towards some that just like weren't even popular or like I hadn't really known about. Um, just like going to these places and trying to meet people and stuff. Eventually I met the guy from Marilyn Manson, Brian.
Yeah. Was that the Spooky Kids time period?
They were playing at it was at
It's Club
the one
Detroit,
in
right?
St. Pete.
Club Detroit next to State Theater. Not
Yeah,
next to State Theater, but next to the Janice Landing, the bar that was down below that.
yeah. They had playing with Jack Off Jill,
Mhm.
and I guess like both bands had some legal problems, obscenity problems of their own. So I like brought my Boiled Angels there and like gave them to him and was like, "Hey, check this out," and he had heard about me through like Trent Reznor, I guess. Um,
Did you
and
have any? You had run-ins with Trent, or you dealt with him?
yeah, yeah, I met him before. They invited me to one of the shows. Later on, they had a big stadium show with Nine Inch Nails and Marilyn Manson.
Were you into any of that, like say, because I know your comics covered a lot of stuff, but did Satanism, did any of that stuff interest you at all? Like just the artwork, or like
Um,
because in the '90s that was kind of with a lot of those bands was obviously you had the deicides and stuff, and
yeah, I definitely was like felt like I was into the whole Satan kind of idea. Um, I didn't want to like worship anything necessarily, like I was worshiping Satan, but I thought it was cool, because I had been into that even before that, like AC/DC, just like listening to old music and old records, and Black Sabbath, and seeing kids wearing the Black Sabbath t-shirts with all this satanic imagery and stuff. I guess I just felt like it was another thing against regular religion, mainstream religion, so that's why I liked it. Um, my mom, she didn't like it, these kind of t-shirts. She called them death shirts, like any kind of death metal shirt. I had a Circle Jerk shirt. I go to see the Circle Jerks, and I never even really thought about their name, Circle Jerks, what it meant. So my mom's new husband, I was wearing the Circle Jerk shirts, and he's like, "I know what that shirt means. I know what that means." I'm like, "Oh, it's a band." They're like, "Wait." I'm like, "Oh, oh, all right. Now I get it."
and
But
it's
she
some.
was, I
And was
think
it
my
influence
mom,
your writing a little bit too? Like you're getting to this music now, and you're doing the art. I even read that the alligators even had an
yeah.
influence on you in Florida.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The alligators, like any kind of little retention pond, in Florida ends up having an alligator in it. Like the golf course, has little ponds and there's alligators in them. And you'd hear about alligators eating children, eating people's dogs and all that. And I was like, wow, that's pretty wild.
And is that and your at that time was your dad? He had I know he had the store, the Cabbage Patch store, right? And it was '90. the 90s. Was he doing that or the real estate? Because I know he also did the real estate right at that time period.
That was, I mean, he was doing real estate and he owned, like, at one point close to like $1 million worth of property, and then everything crashed down. It had a lot to do with Ronald Reagan, like switching something. I don't remember what it was, but he allowed something to happen that really screwed a lot of people that had real estate at the time with like some new tax thing or whatever. And places my father owned were cheap, run-down places, places that were like on Fort Harrison, which was like the crack alley, basically. Um, Places that were really something in the 50s, but by the 80s they were run down and no one wanted them. And so his properties, a lot of them like bordered the black neighborhoods. And when he lost his properties, they were all destroyed by the city because they don't want that black neighborhood spreading further. But also he was at war. He became, where he was at war with the city of Largo. The people that had those positions of looking into your maintenance of the property and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And you really can't go to war with those people, because you're going to lose, unfortunately.
Especially in Florida.
And he lost, yeah.
You
But
know,
then that's when he started the Cabbage Patch, which it was called the Cabbage Patch because it was a fruit and vegetable stand. My father was always like dead set against alcohol and cigarettes, but nobody was buying the vegetables hardly. So he started selling beer and cigarettes for a cheap price. And it was doing pretty good. And when I lost my job, that's where I ended up working for him at his convenience store. So I'd work behind the counter.
and and you're putting out them like you're doing the Boiled Angel, and a lot of this 1990, obviously. So for those who don't know, August 1990, there's a killing spree over in Gainesville, which
Hmm.
is Danny Rawling, the Gainesville Ripper. I think he killed 5 students. He I mean, obviously it was a pretty brutal story. Cut their heads off, some of them, and like kind of
Yeah.
placed them in positions and stuff and raped them. And just they also, I think
Oh,
he
yeah.
confessed to some other murders over in Louisiana afterwards. And I think he tried to kill his own father even.
Yeah.
So this happens, and you're putting out these comics, right? And do you remember hearing about the Gainesville murders before anything, like just from
Um,
the news and stuff?
well, definitely. I mean, we'd hear about it almost daily. This was a time when it seemed like the United States was really obsessed with serial killers. There's like videos about serial killers and Ted Bundy. I remember when he was executed. Um, and people really had this fear of serial killers, it seemed, that was kind of like not knowing who they are or, why they're doing it. And of course, you're still more likely to get killed in a car accident than by a serial killer. Um, but yeah, so people were like really kind of fearful of this. And I felt like that kind of interested me, like just more like the fear of it and like wondering why people would do that. And, they had another suspect at first, this guy named James Humphrey, and he had a big scar across his face. And so he looked like a serial killer to people, I guess. They thought, well, he's the one. He got arrested for hitting his grandmother, and they kept him in jail on $1 million bond because they thought he was the killer, but they couldn't prove it yet. Um, Eventually, they had to let him go because they had no proof, and it turns out he didn't do it. It was this other guy.
And they
Um,
caught Rawlings what tried to break into somewhere, right? He was robbing somebody, I think.
yeah, I think so. If that's the right story. An interesting little side thing about that is Sandra London, who in number 7, The Boiled Angel, I published a story of Gerald Schaefer's, who's a serial killer, that Sandra had published originally, his story called Expecting Dinner. And Gerald Schaefer was like a serial killer, used to be a cop, and he was killing women, and he was in prison. and he started writing stories supposedly based on like real things he did, murders. Um, so I was talking to Sandra, and she was actually like dating Schaefer in prison, conjugal visits or something. But they were like a couple. And then she heard about Danny Rowling, who ended up being in the same prison as Gerald Schaefer, and she went to interview him, fell in love with him, dumped Schaefer to be with Danny, you know.
Hmm.
So that was like a kind of interesting element of it. But she had a story. She said that, she came to visit Largo. She was like in Atlanta. And she said that Danny told her rather, that he went to Mons Venus, that's a strip club in Tampa.
Oh yeah, the spaceship, right? That's the
Mons
Odyssey. I think
Venus.
the Odyssey. Yeah.
Across the street, yeah, Space Odyssey. But evidently he was smoking crack with these two strippers and they ripped him off, and he always wanted to go back and kill those two particular strippers. And so Sandra was doing like a talk show, tabloid talk show down in Tampa. And I was like, well, let's go to Mons Venus. She's like, well, I want to go to Mons Venus and research, find out who those girls were. And I'm thinking, well, how is that going to happen, But anyway, we'll do it. We'll go. By the time we got there, she was so drunk that she was like drooling. And one of the strippers recognized her from the show she was on and was like, hey, can I get your autograph? And so Sandra like scribbled something on a napkin. And that was pretty much that. That was the investigation. Didn't go anywhere. But another thing she said about Danny was that he was being visited in his cell by the Mushroom Man. He would actually see this little dwarf that had like a mushroom cap head come into his cell, so he would hallucinate apparently.
Crazy.
But yeah, it's craziness though.
So this backfires on you because you're putting out, you're doing Boiled Angel 91.
Yeah.
So they pull over a guy in California though, right? They pull him over. I think they get him for weed or something like that, and he has a copy of Boiled
Yeah,
Angel with him.
that's the story. I found that out because when my lawyer got all the paperwork associated with my case from investigators and wherever, um, he saw notes about all that stuff. So the first thing that was crazy, I don't know, did we talk about the well, yeah, he had all that paperwork. So what was the question again?
Oh, it was with the boy when he got pulled over. That's where they got the Boiled
Oh,
Angel was
yeah,
on. Was the California officer made the traffic stop, right? And
yeah. So that's how I heard about that, um, that story, because the lawyer had it. They said that they pulled someone over at a traffic stop, and they found Boiled Angel number 6 in the search, and the officer heard about the Florida case, serial killer murders, and thought, well, this looks similar, yeah, basically.
and a few days before Christmas, I guess you're at your mom's house, and you get the two FBI agents show up. Are you like just like what the? It has to be mind blowing. Like, are you serious when they get out and start telling you that you're a suspect?
They weren't FBI agents, actually. They were for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And evidently, Florida has so many departments of law enforcement, so this one's called the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And really, to me, they seem kind of like pussies, like they're doing the kind of work, like they're not really doing real police work. They call it lazy police work.
It's like a school cop.
Going on these crappy leads, they'll probably harass kids, like I was 18. So me and my mother were shopping. We get home, and they were waiting for me, this male and female officer, in an unmarked car. And, they pulled number 6 out of a briefcase, and they asked my mother, "Do you know your son is publishing this kind of stuff?" And they said, "Well, because of this, you're a suspect in the Gainesville student murders." Of course, that's not what a mother wants to hear. It's not what I want to
Yeah.
hear either. But it makes me and her worry.
What are you thinking when they tell you this? Are you just like, is it like, I can't imagine what would be going through your mind. Like, are you fucking serious?
Time, yeah, I was very much thinking like, "Wow, are you serious? This is crazy." Um, and then in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking, well, it's Florida. That's always in my mind. Like, of course this is happening. It's Florida. And I'll just mention, I probably forgot to mention earlier, but from an early age living in Florida, from 12 years on, I was regularly harassed by police, because had long hair and I fit that description and that profiling of people they like to pick on, just the way it is. And so all that harassment, though, it kind of hardened me towards police. And so by this time, the detectives are coming up to me. I think I laughed at them because I was like, well, this is just going beyond, and, because I used to get pulled over all the time. It didn't help that I had a realistic skull as a brake light, blue lights in the brake in the eyes of the skull looking out the back window. And then like Fangoria bumper stickers and whatever. I had a Fangoria bumper sticker. It just said "More Gore," and not Gore the politician.
Yeah. Well, back then it was people did stare. I mean, I remember even back in the day, people stereotype you back then. It was a lot
Well,
different than it is now.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, at one point I had just bought a 35 millimeter still camera, and I was walking away from the officers for a second. I was going to go in the house and get the camera. I wanted to take a picture of us three together, is what was in my mind. Of course, this is glazed over with nervousness and, not even really knowing what to do. I started just walking towards the house. He says, "Where are you going? Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to get my camera." He says, "What are you talking about your camera?" I said, "I want to take a picture of us." And that's when they got more nasty. And he's like, "I don't like your attitude." And then he says, "We can have this magazine taken to a judge and have it ruled as obscenity," something along those lines. Then they said, "Well, you have to give a DNA blood sample to clear your name, DNA evidence to clear your name as the murderer." Later on, I had seen a newspaper article talking about that. That murder case had over 10,000 suspects. And they were using it as an excuse to build their database, their blood bank DNA base, And it also said in the article that you don't have to give your blood, a court order. If they get a court order, you do. But my mother was very insistent that I do it. She said, "Well, they have all the power, you just have to do what they say and whatever." Um, so we set up a date for me to go a few days later, I guess it was, and give my blood sample. So we went there, me and my mother. So we got there, and they opened the Boiled Angel to the contributors page with everyone's name and address, people in the issue. And she says, "So, are these names and addresses of people that are in this issue?" It's pretty obvious, it seemed, but I didn't say anything. And my mother's like, "She's asking you a question." And I said, "I don't want to answer any questions." Because then I was pissed, this quickly turned to anger. And they couldn't do anything about that. I didn't want to answer any questions, So then we did the blood sample. Turns out I wasn't the murderer. And I thought that was the last I heard of them.
But what did they do then? Then they kind of like they told the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office what, that you're innocent, but they're still like behind the scenes investigating your writing, your comics, right? Like they're kind of
Yeah.
trying to
So
figure out how to screw you eventually.
the male and female officer that worked for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, his name was something like Mike Tezzi, something like that.
And he used the name Mike
Mike Flory,
Flore, right?
So, he took up a personal interest. Later on, the story I heard was that he was in contact with the state attorney's office saying, well, what do we have to do to try and get this kid? And the answer was, well, you have to order it direct from him. This
Because
was
right,
back
they couldn't prove, right? They couldn't prove
as
that you
far as
had.
I know. Yeah,
Yeah,
you couldn't prove it, I guess. So, and I had a post office box. I had my mom's address always for issue 6, but this was part of the problem. We were getting letters from prisoners because I would correspond with prisoners sometimes. And she was worried about that, home address. So I had to get a post office box. So, post office box, every day I have fan mail, orders, zines for trade. It was a fun life for me at the time.
and you're doing 7 to 8 during this time period, right? You're still publishing this while this is all going on.
Yeah. Yeah. This was like, no, I was in a process of putting together number 7. So they came up to me. Let's see.
This is when Stuart Baggage gets involved too, right? The prosecutor.
Yeah, so they told him, he's got to have proof of where this came from. So I get a letter from Largo, Florida, Mike Flory. And, I open it up. I was surprised because I never got a letter from my own community, someone in my own town. And he's, says, they actually, in the documentary, they have the letter. They say what it says, but he's like, oh, I heard about I'm from Fort Lauderdale, and I heard about your art down there, and it looks just like everything I believe in, and all this stuff. Well, I wrote him back. I said, "You're the first person in my area. Why don't we just meet in person?" And he had some excuse, busy with work or whatever. And actually, I was doing other things at the time. It was probably when I was making my videos and stuff, and I was just got busy, so I didn't send the stuff out right away. And he wrote me another letter. He's like, well, why didn't you send the books yet? I mean, I'm not a cop or anything. So finally, I sent him the issues he bought, which was 7 and 8. And of course, I didn't hear anything. That's because they were putting their case together for like 2
So,
years.
and that was it, right? So you had to. So basically, the reason they couldn't get you right away is because the guy who had it, they found it in California. They had to prove, right, that you were actually printing this and distributing this in Pinellas County.
Yeah. Yeah. I think printing it didn't even matter. I mean, just I was there, you know, distributing it. But yeah, they did get me with a printing and distributing charge. It was 3 charges of obscenity. Um, so yeah, I didn't hear anything for 2 years, and then one day that's when I got the state attorney's letter from the state attorney's office. So when I saw the return address was from the state attorney's office, I knew that wasn't something good.
Yeah, so I think it was. I was looking at this. It was March 31st, 1993. They mailed you the letter from the Pinellas County with the
Yeah,
summons, and I guess which I know the courthouse over on 49th Street at that time period in Clearwater.
yeah.
And your first what date was April 19th, 1993. Are you starting to see yourself on the news and stuff now?
Um, well, I mean, I wasn't at that point yet. Like when I got the letter, at first I just couldn't believe it, you know. Um, and I remember that I told my father about it. His story is different. He says he didn't know about it, but I told him because I needed to tell somebody. And he said, He had always told me I was going to get arrested for pornography someday, and I didn't believe him. So that's basically what he said. And, it wasn't until the actual first court date that I realized it was a bigger deal. So I was getting in my car to go to the courthouse one morning, and my father came out of, there was a little luncheonette called Ted's Luncheonette, which is on the other side of where his convenience store was.
Cabbage Patch.
Yeah, so he's having his breakfast and reads the paper. He opens the newspaper up, and there's an article like on the front page about me and the charges,
And that was
saying,
St. Pete Times, right? And they actually mentioned they
yeah,
compare, even though they know that you're innocent with the Gainesville murders, they put you in that. They still mention that on the paper front.
oh yeah, of course. Um, yeah, he's like holding the paper up in the air, like holding it up, just screaming, pointing at it. You're in the fucking paper. You're gonna go to jail for 3 years.
So what were they trying to get you with? It was what, a publication of lewd, obscene material, and then distro and sales.
Um, yeah, publishing, distributing, and advertising for sale. Obscenity.
And the thing is too is that this is not something you would find in the store. This is something that you actually had to reach out to you to get.
Yeah. I mean, really, the only place in Florida it was for sale was at Alternative Records in Tampa. I had taken some copies there, but I kind of screwed that up because I put like I made some little cheap free zines, and I laid those with the free stuff. And I guess I wasn't supposed to do that because the zines I had there were wrapped in bags and marked as adults only. But evidently, some kid took one of the free things home, and the parent got mad
Uh,
and complained, so they dropped all my stuff.
and they were looking at, so they wanted to get you for 3 years for obscenity. And when you show up at the court, like, are you just, because when you first show up for that, is it like overwhelming? There's like what, protesters out there, and
Um,
like concerned women of America, I
yeah,
read, and citizens opposing pornography and all that.
yeah, it was crazy. I showed up. There's news cameras. There's the protest groups against me. Women opposing pornography. Another one which was like concerned grandmothers or whatever. And these people came out of the woodwork just because they saw it on the news. I mean, no one knew what I was doing. Because I didn't want them to know.
Were you dealing with death threats at all or anything like that?
Never anything like that. But my father one day he said to me, am I crazy? But he said he had just been to a yard sale and he saw a bulletproof vest for sale and he thought about getting it for me. I was like, well, yeah, you should have. I mean, just for fun, I would have worn it to the courthouse, this big old bulletproof vest. He was thinking of, Hustler.
Yeah,
He got shot. Larry Flint got shot with religious situation.
and they also, I was seeing it in the documentary. They mentioned this. They also, you had another guy you had traded with in 1990, Mark LeBit. I want to say, I don't want to say his name wrong, but Breverte or something like that. He did Head Trip.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was doing a Head Trip magazine, right? And actually, so
Yeah.
they tried to get him too for bestiality and obscenity for his books that he put out, the Head Trip
Yeah.
zine. And you had actually traded with him earlier.
Yeah, I was trading with him and I had submitted a story from Boiled Angel 1 called Blood and Salt, 3-page comic. And he printed that in his zine. And I think that was a big part also why they were going after his zine, because I was in it, even though it's a pretty mild comic compared to some of them, the Blood and Salt comic. But
They dropped the case against him, right? He got it.
yeah, so they took him to court on bestiality charges, not really knowing what to do. I mean, The way he described it is that there were these like new wing of the police department called the morality police, but they really didn't know what to do or how to do their jobs, legally. So they just go after people like this guy doing a fanzine.
Insane.
And, in court, I mean, the lawyer basically argued, well, the only thing that happened was this guy drew, pen to paper. No dog was molested. No bestiality actually happened, so on. And there was no basis for anything that the state, Canada was trying to get him on. And so it was dismissed.
It's insane. And for you, you went to the pretrial, right, which you sat in on, and then I think the pretrial judge was Mary Jean McAllister. So she tosses out two of the jurors who are like younger people, right, in their 30s. What? Because they basically express that they believe in freedom of art.
Well, that was another disturbing element for me to see how it really works with that stuff, So it started out with a pool of 30 people from the community. You're going to get 6 people from that 30 that are supposedly impartial as can be or whatever. And it isn't really the judge that decides, it's the prosecutor and my lawyer take turns asking questions to the 30 people, striking down. They have a certain number of people they can strike. My lawyer can take out people, prosecutor can. So you have one kid that was like 18 years old, and he's, one of the questions my lawyer had was, is it okay for art to be shocking? Most of them, their answer was no, art should not be shocking. I don't want to be shocked by my art. But the 2 people that said it's okay to be for art to be shocking was this 18-year-old guy. He said, well, I think it's all right. And then this woman, maybe in her 30s, oh, it's okay for art to be a little edgy. Well, of course, the prosecutor those the first 2 he struck out, because you don't want them on the jury. I remember another question my lawyer had was, have you ever had contact with pornography? So one of the old ladies on the jury, her answer was, oh, yeah, I had contact with pornography. I found copies of Playboy in my son's underwear drawer back in the 50s. I mean, I knew
God.
I was in trouble.
And did you even have, so you obviously you got some help from the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, but at first that was because your lawyer, right, was Luke Leroux,
Yeah.
your defense lawyer. But at first, did you find, like, was it hard to get support from fellow comics at first? Because I know there was some people who wanted to stay away from it and stuff. And how long did it take you to get representation from the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund or help from it?
I had, when I first got the summons, I talked about, the 3 charges. Actually, the first person I called was Scott Cunningham in New York City, friend, pen pal, and he also had contributed to the Boiled Angels. I called him up, told him about it, and that's when he told me about the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. I didn't know about them. And he gave me the 800 number, so I called, and I didn't hear back. I talked to someone finally. They said, well, FedEx us the books, and we'll look at them. So I FedExed them the Boiled Angels that were charged, 7 and 8. Didn't hear anything back for a while. I had to go to court again without representation. This was the second time pleading not guilty. Stuart Baggage said to the judge, I think Mike Diana is being lackadaisical in trying to find a lawyer. And the judge says, is it true? Are you being lackadaisical? I said, what does lackadaisical mean? I didn't know what that was. And she says, are you trying to get a lawyer? And I said, oh, I'm trying to get a hold of the Comic Defense Fund. They're going to get me a lawyer. Evidently, it turns out there was some internal problem with the defense fund, like the guy who was running it at that moment in charge of something was not doing his job or something. They had to get rid of him. I think part of it was that they were having trouble defending this. They had They had mostly, all their cases actually were like comic book stores getting in trouble for selling adult comics, stuff like that, censorship issues with comic store owners being arrested. I was the first artist they were ever dealing with getting in trouble. So maybe they really didn't know how to go about it or something.
Luke LaRoe, he was really good for you though. He really did bust his ass on your case.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And the court tried to, and they using the whole, like, I had read that they were trying to basically, even though they knew you were innocent again, they were still trying to paint you as this basically serial killer because of the whole Rawlings case thing in Gainesville. They were kind of linking you to that. So the juror, because I know there was a couple things. I know, you wanted to bring some of your other comics in there with the X, because the reason that is the X at the end of the comics is because they're the underground comics. You wanted to basically
Yeah.
show them that this was not, you're not like the first person to ever do this. They didn't want that in there because they didn't want the jurors to see that, and they
Yeah.
also gave the jurors a copy of your buried boiled angel, just to, like, basically like shock them.
Well, yeah, that's yeah, they gave out the boiled angels right away, just to shock the jury who had never didn't know what this was about or anything. And yeah, I was troubling that they kept bringing up this fact that I was a suspect in the murders, like, I mean, and Stuart Baggish, the prosecutor, they had expert witnesses. One of their witnesses was Sidney Marin, who was a serial killer expert, psychiatrist, and he,
Deviant sex guy, right, or something like that.
yeah, helped put away Ted Bundy and these names, and they told the jury that's what this guy is.
I thought
Um,
what was funny too, they bought in an art expert from Eckerd College, which is like a religious college, to also
oh,
testify against you.
oh yeah, that was crazy. You know, you know what happened with that? So they had the art expert there from Eckerd College, which is a Christian Florida college or whatever, and he had taken upon himself to enlarge copies of baby fuck dog food.
Which was based on a true. I will say this too: is this was actually based on a true case in New York, right, where
Yeah,
a father killed his child and fed it to the dog. Right? I guess
yeah,
he.
yeah. I had heard about that case, and that was like my part of my inspiration. Um, but he was talking about. He was there to talk about how this was not art. So he says, "Oh, it's not could not be considered real art," and then he goes on to say that he used to do illustrations and comics for a Christian bulletin. And he once had a comic that was too graphic for the Christian bulletin. It was a body laying on a table, a dead guy with his chest open, and another guy is eating the guy's innards. And the caption was, "It's all a matter of taste." And he's saying that he was disappointed when he was censored back then. And then he's looking at the comic, dog food comic, and he's pointing to the lines and he says, "Look at the lines, feel the energy. Look at the power of these lines." And I'm just thinking to myself, well, is everyone hearing this? I mean, I'm gonna win. I'm gonna win.
Did you start knowing? Did you? When did you start knowing that you were kind of screwed though a little bit? Like, were you like, man, these guys are really gonna sell me? Like, you weren't even like. When did you start feeling that?
Really, I thought I was gonna win until the end when they read the verdict. I mean, I had hope, just because it seemed to me just too crazy. Um, I think the problem was the jury didn't really know what they were supposed to be deciding. Because in the obscenity cases, they use this, like, certain test, they call it, which is if it lacks these values, if it lacks serious political, scientific, literary value, if it has any one of those values, if it has artistic value, it cannot be labeled as obscenity because it's protected by freedom of speech. So what they were proving in court for the jury is that my art, even though it was art, was not art. It had no artistic value. It had no literary value, even though there was writings and poetry. They were out to prove that it had none of these values. So, and of course, you had Sid. They call him Sid the Squid behind the scenes as a nickname. The psychiatrist for the prosecution. And of course, he's saying, well, this is the kind of thing that serial killers read. But Baggish, I think, was just making stuff up. He says, well, first they start to read, first they watch the movies, then they read the books, then they read the comics, and then they're really killing people.
He was a comic collector too, wasn't he, Baggish?
He was a what?
Didn't he collect comics too, the
Oh,
prosecutor?
well, he said he liked Richie Rich comics.
Ah, okay.
Figures.
But you started getting I remember there was, so speaking of Tampa, around that time, you were also getting support from a local metal personality there, which was Susie Morbid, who had the Morbid Underground, because she had
Yeah.
the same lawyer as you, because speaking of Gigi Allen, she had shown on public access Gigi Allen live footage, right, which got her screwed. You were also you were
Yeah.
on the cover of Creative Loathing where she saw you, which I remember that, which I think that's gone now. You were in September '93. You were on the cover of that. You were on the cover
Yeah.
of the St. Pete Times, like we said. MTV even contacted you, didn't they?
Yeah. Yeah. They were had done some blurbs or something about it.
Playboy contacted you also, and actually did something on you in there.
Playboy, yeah, they had a whole article about it. You know,
That
um, Playboy thing came about because there was someone who came to my pre-trials and stuff to show support. It was Chuck Shepard, who was in St. Petersburg, I believe, but he did a article called News of the Weird, and it was like weird stories from all over the world, basically. Um, but he would write for Playboy and do different articles, and so he met me to show his support, but also he wanted to write the story. And he was the one person that kept saying to me, he's like, you don't realize how lucky you are. I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, you're going to be famous and blah, blah, blah. I was like,
which
all
I
right.
do got to say, Mike, in a way, it was kind of like the parental advisory stickers on records back in the day. Like
Yeah.
you did get your name spread out by all this craziness. You were on the Rolando show. How was that whole thing?
I mean, it was miserable, but that's how those shows are. You know what it is.
You were
It's
the
like
villain of it.
the theme was I'm in love with a serial killer, I think it was called I'm in love with a sexual deviant, something along those lines. So they had I was one of the guests, and Susie Morbid was on the show with me because she was like the one that was in love with me, and I'm the deviant one. And they had another guest who was this woman that was in love with Richard Ramirez and had like a thing going through letters through prison. Um, but the way these shows are made is, we're the villains definitely, and we're in the green room ready to come out, and we hear all this screaming and foot stomping. They're like revving up the crowd,
Yeah.
and you get unnerved, because it's like going out to be fed to the lions. It felt like similar to that. And then you go out, and it was in New York City. They flew us in. They give you $50 spending money, and you get a free motel room. That's the deal to do the show. And the audience, the guys looking at me, punching their fists, and they're like, "Come to New York! Come to New York!" I'm like, "Well, I am. I'm here."
Yeah, I saw some of the people yelling at you on there. I mean, it has
Yeah.
to be
I mean,
surreal sitting there like, what the fuck?
I was just thinking, like, this is just craziness. I mean,
Well, then and then you tried to move the case to Tampa, right? You guys had tried to move it over there, hoping it would be a little easier.
yeah, my lawyer tried to get it dismissed at first, saying that since the since they got I was sending the Boiled Angels through the mail, so they said, well, it's not up to the state; it's up to the federal level if they want to prosecute me for sending obscenity through the mail, assuming they wouldn't do it, But that didn't work. They said, well, if we go to Tampa, we'll get a better jury. They didn't want to let the case out of Largo. So that was that.
And your lawyer, Lareau, he's doing your final statement, right? And and then basically like the judge takes a recess during the final statement.
Oh, yeah, that was weird.
I've never
Yeah.
heard. That's insane.
Like he's just started the statement, and the judge is like, puts his, hands on the, stands up, puts his hands on the desk thing, and he's like, all right, we're going to take a break.
And that was Judge Walter Fullerton.
Yeah. And even the prosecutor Baggage just like looking around like, what happened?
And it takes him less than 90 minutes
I
to
didn't
convict you.
realize what happened yet, but Luke was really pissed off about it, like,
Yeah, I saw where he was saying that he believes still that if he got to make his final statement, maybe it would have went a little different.
yeah, I think so.
So,
But yeah, I think in the end, the jury just didn't understand what they were like supposed to be. They of course didn't like the material, but that's not what they're supposed to be judging. They're supposed to be whether it's
well,
obscenity. I mean,
well, they were going by the Miller test, right? Which is the
yeah,
primer, was basically the legal test to determine what if it's like obscenity,
yeah,
right? And they were going by that. And I heard some of the reasoning, and it was ridiculous. Um, but the fact that they took them 90 minutes only to basically give you the guilty, to
yeah,
basically make you guilty. And then they take you. I know how that courthouse is. So they take you from the courthouse, which is like right across the street, to the jail cell, and you spend 4 days there.
yeah. So the judge ordered me to go to jail to wait sentencing, which he didn't have to send me to jail, but I decided to. Um, it was a Thursday that I was found guilty. So Thursday night, I was in the jail, in the general lockup, which is like you're in a cell, like with the fluorescent lights on 24 hours a day, a metal bed, no blankets, pillow, nothing.
You're with rapists and killers too, right? They put you in with.
I mean, I was in my own cell. Usually they have a couple people in a cell, not many at first till they decide where to put you. Um, but then the next day they moved me to a low security area. That's like with repeat DUI offenders. I saw people in there that were customers of my dad's store, because
Oh
again,
shit.
those are the people that the law constantly picks on. You're going to see them in and out of jails their whole lives probably. But um, so the other days it was like a big room with lots of bunk beds, and thing we'd do each night is watch the news, and so the news reports were on me, and everyone recognized me that it was me, and
So
they said, "Oh
when they
no."
read your verdict out, man, what are you thinking? Are you just like, it's unbelievable, right? You're like, are you? I can't believe it's come to this.
Yeah, yeah, it was very disappointing, of course. And again, I just thought to myself, "Oh, it figures." Then I figured, like, well, I should have known that I'd be found guilty because that's the way it works here. But really, that's part of the horrible feeling is that you really feel like you didn't get a fair shake. And I think
And
a lot
it,
of people feel like that with the Florida legal system.
and you can tell me if I'm wrong here. This is what you got. You got it. So they wanted to put you in jail for was it 2 years? They wanted to,
3 years.
3 years. So you get 3 years of probation, $3,000 fine. You can tell me if I'm wrong about any of these because I could be. $1,200 evaluation psychiatric sessions. 1,200 hours of community service, which actually the comic book relief fund helped you with that, right? Serving some of those hours.
Yeah, that ended up getting screwed up, though, of course.
40-hour week. You had to have a 40 hours a week job. You had to pass a journalism and ethics class. You weren't allowed 10 feet around anyone under 18. Believe this shit, Ed? It's unbelievable. Random searches at your house, and you're not allowed. This is the craziest thing. I mean, it's all crazy. but you're not allowed to draw at home, and they can just pop in and make sure you don't have pencils and paper out whenever they felt like.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Welcome to
you know,
Russia.
That's what it felt like, you know.
God, man. And you
So
spoke to a jury member too, right? That told you that like he was dismissed and told you that he knew it was fucked when he was sitting in the pre stuff.
yeah, yeah. So I was, that's when the jury was deliberating for that 90 minutes or however long it was, or was it 40 minutes? But I was outside. They didn't need that alternate jury member, the seventh guy. So he was saying to me, that the feelings he got from being in there with the other jury members is that the serial killer talk really had them spooked, that this is like serial killer material and all that stuff, it's just feeding into that fear they already had. Um, but when I had to go back to the courtroom from the jail, still wearing the same clothes I had on 4 days, I was really worried, of course, because I knew I was facing 3 years. And the lawyer, my lawyer, Luke, he said, well, he didn't have to put you in jail these 4 days, he could have just sent you home and to come back.
Did you feel like that Judge Fullerton had a problem with you? Like, did you just feel like animosity the
Yeah,
whole time?
yeah, pretty much. Um, and so the first thing he said when I got in there, he asked me, he said, well, did you learn anything that 4 days you were in jail? And I said, well, I was trying to be sarcastic, and I said, well, I learned that I don't want to be in jail. And he kind of looked at me stern. He said, is that all? And I said, oh, I realized what I did was wrong, which was a lie, and then he had this huge stack of letters on his desk in front of him. He put his hand on this pile of mail, and he said, these are all letters from concerned Pinellas County citizens telling me to put you in jail.
Well, from St. Patrick's Church.
Yeah. So now they're having kind of like arguments where the prosecutor can say stuff, my lawyer can say stuff. Both my parents showed up for the sentencing, My mom and dad hadn't been in the same room together since I was 12 years old, since divorce. But they both showed up because they were concerned. And, my father came up and he can talk to the judge. And he said, oh, I don't think my son's ever even been into a fight before. And I'm thinking, oh, great way to embarrass me, Dad. And he's like, I need my son to work at the convenience store, stuff like that, Well, I look across the room and I see this guy that was one of our neighbors. Right next to the cabbage patch, we had this little house that me and my father and my brother were living in. And my brother was having like death metal parties all the time, he would spray paint pentagrams on the side of the house. And we had these religious neighbors that had a newborn baby. And they were always calling the police on us, I think they thought that me and my brother were the same person. They didn't realize we were two different people. We look alike, both had long hair. So they think, well, there's this supervillain, and now he's in jail for Boiled Angels. So he showed up to court to talk to the judge about what it was like living across from me and all the crazy shit I did, which was probably my brother doing it, And that's when I started getting nervous because, I don't need that. And he starts out by saying, or no, the Baggish says, this gentleman used to live across the street from Mr. Diana. His wife didn't show up because she was afraid for her life.
Oh, God.
And who knows what he was going to say, but, Baggish said, well, is it okay if he speaks? And the judge said, well, was any of this brought up during the trial? And Baggish said, no. And judge said, well, no, I don't want to hear from him. So maybe
and
the
they
judge
also,
was a little bit fair,
but they would mess with your family too because they the fire chief, right? So You guys, the house you guys lived in, they basically like went there and declared it unlivable and knocked it down and gave you guys a week to get out of there.
Yeah, we had a week to get out, and they condemned it. It was a condemnable building, technically. It didn't have a proper foundation or something, but that's pretty quick, you know. The bulldozer going leveling it a week later, um, and that's when we moved to Seminole, Florida. My father opened a pizza shop,
Oh, you worked there too, right?
and I worked
Um,
there.
did you
Um,
keep on drawing? Like when you go home and they tell you you can't draw, do you pretty much stay away from it for a while?
well, that was the thing, you know. Like part of the judge's thinking, part of like one of the excuses I had for doing my art during the trial was that I thought of myself as like a reporter, like I was reporting on these serial killing things and stuff. And so the judge said, "Oh, well, if you want to be a real reporter, you're going to have to take and pass a journalism ethics class so you can learn how to be a serious journalist, you know, and psychiatric evaluation at your own expense, you know."
But are you
Um,
getting more requests for the magazine now when this is going on? Like, are you getting like? I mean, because I
um,
would figure when the case is out there, I know. I mean, the way these things usually work, like if it's like a record that you shouldn't buy, Ed knows they, back in the day, you can't have this record. Well, everybody wants that record.
yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of that, you know, not as much as you'd think, you know, not Two Live Crew territory. Because, you know,
Yeah.
this is like a fanzine. I mean, people around there, I think they were curious to see it, but they didn't want to buy it, you know, and they weren't really zine people. They're really fans, you know, most of them um, that I had contact with, you know.
Cool. And
But
then
I,
you so
I had started a new comic called Superfly, and that was this guy, Shane, in Chicago. He came all the way to Florida to visit me, and said he wanted to reprint Boiled Angel, you know, because I couldn't have anything to do with it. So he would print it. So we did some reprints at that time. He was selling them by mail from Chicago. Um, but a funny little story about that, he called his publishing company Mike Hunt Comics.
oh yeah, I know who this is.
And there's a joke from Porky's movie, Mike Hunt.
Yep.
You think it's like Mike Hunt, you know. She gets prank phone calls, Mike Hunt there. And she's like, Mike Hunt, has anybody seen Mike Hunt? So,
And Shane was putting out that naked. What was it? Naked Aggression
yeah,
zine.
Naked Aggression. So I met him, and my lawyer actually called him up and said, "We want to bring you to Florida so during the trial you can explain why you're publishing his work, why you think his work's important, Superfly book and whatever." So Shane shows up in Florida, you know, again. They flew him out there.
Shane Bugby, right?
Yeah. So they say to Shane, my lawyer says to Shane, "All right, Mike, you're going to go up next." And he's like, "Mike?" And it's, "Oh, your name is Mike Hunt, right?" He's like, "No, it's Shane Bugby." And he goes, "Oh, I thought your name was Mike Hunt." And then Shane explained the joke of Mike Hunt. Now, since it wasn't even the right name, they couldn't use him. It's too late to change the name. You can't do it. But my lawyer, we were joking, like, can you imagine them saying, "Mike Hunt to the stand, please"?
Uh,
You
you know,
know,
and to this
I don't
day,
imagine Shane would have had anything to say that would have changed anything anyway.
well, you moved. Well, so you were like, what? You were in the middle of an appeal, and that's when you relocated to New York, and you didn't even tell LaRoe, right? Your lawyer. You just kind of
Um,
made the change.
well, the first, yeah, it seemed like the appeal, you know, I went on probation, so I had to like start all that stuff. When you leave the jail, you got to, like, the next day you have to be on probation. Otherwise, it's a violation, you know. So I started the probation process, paying the fine. You pay $100 a month towards a 3,000 fine, and you know, I even asked the probation officer about the condition of busting into my place without a warrant. And I said, "Well, they actually going to break the door down, or can I like let them in?" And he said that pretty much it was up to him to make that call. if he thought I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing into probation. And he also said that he knew about my case, he was keeping up with it, and he said he thought it was pretty ridiculous, and he just wants to get me through probation as quick and easily as possible. So I said, oh, well, that's good. But then when we decided to go on appeal, I already had started working community service hours. During the appeal, you can put the probation and all the requirements on hold. So that's what we did until the outcome of the appeal. So I didn't have to do probation. I didn't have to pay the fine during that time. But, my case was on appeal. It was a second district court of appeals. And I just didn't have a good feeling, of course. I was like, well, they're not going to just give me that. One good thing that happened during the appeal is they dropped one of the charges. So the advertising obscenity charge was dropped because what they were calling an advertisement was just me mentioning the next issue.
Which
Like
hadn't
in
been
number
done yet.
7, I said, be sure to get number 8. That's not really an advertisement. So that charge being dropped took $1,000 away from that I had to pay. It took, community service hours some away and whatever. So it helped out.
You lost the appeal, right?
Well, yeah, so I still didn't have a good feeling. I decided to move to New York City before I got the decision. And I didn't tell the lawyer, I just decided I wanted to get out of there. And my goal was to get away, to get to New York by my birthday, which was on June 5th. So I actually left like on June 3rd. And on my birthday, when I was in New York, my father called me up and he says, the police are looking for you. We got word that your, conviction was upheld, and they denied any further appeal because they're tired of hearing. The lawyer said, well, they're tired of hearing about it, so they deny any more appeals. So they were wanting to rearrest me on my birthday, and luckily I wasn't there.
And you were wanted until what, 1990? So since
Well,
1998.
it's misdemeanor charges, so there's no extradition. Like a felony, they can come and get you, but
Were you
misdemeanors, they
sneaking
can't.
back there at all to go see your mom or anything?
I did, but in New York, they said, at first they said, well, we're going to call the New York office and have them transfer your probation to like New York City or something. Well, New York City didn't want anything to do with it. I wish they would have said okay and then just let me go, but so Florida said, oh, we're going to do this special thing where you can do your probation by mail. You're going to send us your fine, your probation payment, $50 a month. You're going to call us on the phone once a month. We're going to have a meeting, whatever. You're still not allowed to draw, At that point, I was doing illustrations for New York Press in New York City, getting paid to do illustrations. Like they had a story about deicide once. And so I did a deicide illustration, and so on. And but they didn't know about that, in Florida. And of course, I was so far away from Florida, it was easy just to not care about it. This was like 1998 now. I moved to New York in 96. By 98, I was back on probation and I was behind in the fine. Probation officer called me up and reminding me that I'm not allowed to draw. And it was a new probation officer, which was kind of nasty attitude, And I was just like, screw it. I'm done. I'm not going to send any money. And my probation got violated. And I thought, oh, I don't need to go to Florida ever again. But as the years went by, I wanted to go visit my mother. So I did go in and out of Florida a few times. There was one point I had a really close call, I think. I was traveling with a passport as my only ID. So I get to Florida. This time at St. Pete Airport, you know where Clearwater
Oh
St.
yeah.
Pete
Mhm.
Airport is. It's right across the street from 49th Street Jail.
Yeah, it's actually right down the road from it.
It's right down the road.
Wilmington, yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, it was a little cheaper. I don't know why I did it rather than Tampa. But so I'm flying out of New York, and the guy that checks the IDs, he says, "Oh, your passport's out of date by like 1 day." And I thought, "Oh crap." So in New York, I have extra security. Not even thinking in my head what that means leaving Florida at the airport, you know, St. Pete Airport. So the 2 weeks go by. I'm going back to New York, and you know, I'm nervous now because I'm starting to think about it. And they say, well, your passport's out of date. You need extra screening, which is like a pat down and so on. Well, I saw this fully uniformed police officer with a police radio and everything standing by the security area. So that's why I was sweating. I felt my underarms sweating, dripping, you know. And I guess he went to the bathroom right before I got up there. He like wasn't there. And so the security woman, as part of the extra screening, I think, is they probably give the cop this ID and he runs it through the computer or his radio. Because she's holding it, looking around. She says, well, where'd he go? And someone said, oh, I think he's in the bathroom. And they're like, sit here and wait. So I'm waiting for this cop to come back. And he didn't come back. And so the plane was going to leave. She's like, all right, get up. And she gave me a quick frisking and then sent me on the plane. But I think I really came close,
Damn.
you know, that's a short trip from that airport across, you know, to the jail.
Oh yeah, it's like you take that little bendy road right there, and you're right there. He
Yeah.
drops you right off to 49th.
It would have been easy.
Yeah, and but you did now. Now you're legal, right? You did a documentary. You did it with Frank, who did Basket Case and Frank and Hooker. So basically, you started hanging out with him for 6 months. He knew nothing about your case, right? You're over there watching movies with him once a week on kind of like a film study thing, and you
Yeah.
tell him about your case, and he decides to do the documentary on you, which is actually kind of hard to find, to be honest. The doc, it's not like
Yeah.
that's what I was saying about you when you first came on the show, man. It's like it seems like a lot of the stuff about you they try to like erase off, like
Right.
it's even the doc is not easy to find. But they basically, so what? They took that money from that after you made, like I said, you made the movie poster for Bad Biology for him. Start
Yeah.
working with him. Does the documentary and pays off your fines with it.
So we started like hanging out. It was my friend named Mike Hunchback, he calls himself.
From the band Hunchback, right?
Yeah. He kind of was the one that set this all up. You know, he asked me, can you do a poster? We're going to meet Frank Henenlotter. I was like, all right. So Frank asked us, do you want to come by my house and watch some weird movies, you know? So we did that, and it kind of became this weekly ritual. Like every Thursday, we'd go there and watch crazy movies. He had a huge collection. And then one day, I guess I mentioned something about getting in trouble in Florida. He says, what, getting in trouble in Florida? And I realized I never told him. He never heard about what happened, you know? And then the next time I went over there, he's like, you know, we're going to do a documentary about you. And I said, oh, wow, that's great. So we actually went to Florida. You know, all of us went to Florida filming, and I went there even though I was there illegally.
I saw you standing on Florida Avenue, even.
Yeah, Florida Avenue.
Yeah.
You know, in Largo, there's like streets called Rosary Road and all
Yeah.
that. Very religious. We took a spin through Largo, and yeah, so they did the documentary. You know, luckily I didn't get arrested or anything, but I was very nervous about it. And they had to raise some money for the doc to put it out. So they're saying, well, we're going to raise $40,000.
You did
Raise
a
an extra
telethon, right?
5,000. Yeah, I mean, it was Kickstarter, but then to really push the end of Kickstarter to get what they needed to make it happen, they did the telethon. And that was all Hunchback's, you know, master plan or his idea.
Jello Biafra was the narrator, which was cool too.
Yeah, got Jello Biafra. We got the G.G. Allin song in the beginning. But yeah, a lot of people helped out. They were trying to get a Misfits song at first, and they were working with Danzig for a minute. And Frank was telling me about it. Like they said, all right, well, if you want to use it for the doc, $10,000 for the first screening.
Yeah, I was actually going to play a
Great.
Misfit song for your episode, but I figured they would definitely nail us for copyright. I figured Gigi's
I
a safe
would've
bet.
Yeah. I mean, 10,000, and then we'll talk about it after that. Like, oh, well, if you want to do a video, it's more. I mean, whatever. So that
Wow.
wasn't going to happen. But, they got a hold of Merle Allin, and Merle Allin knew about me. And they said, Merle said, oh, what's it for, Mike Diana documentary. And Merle said, oh, you can have it for free.
There you go. Yeah, and they paid off, and they took, like I thought it was really cool that the doc actually paid for your fees and got. Now you can just go to
Yeah.
Florida if you really want to.
So the telethon earned an extra $5,000, and they used that to pay off the remainder of the fine, which was $1,200 I still owed towards the $2,000. I had taken the journalism ethics class at NYU back in '98, so I had to find the paperwork that I passed that. I had to find all the, we talked about the defense fund. I was doing my charitable hours with the Comic Book Defense Fund. Like Neil Gaiman even was doing a tour with the Defense Fund, so I went out to some of their stops, like in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I spoke about my case, and did some funding kind of work, and that was going to count towards the hours. Well, the probation office decided that it was a conflict of interest. They weren't accepting any of the hours from the Defense Fund. And it wasn't a waste of time. I still enjoyed doing it, but I had to gather all the proof of my hours, which I had all that paperwork still from Florida when I was doing hours there at a thrift store. And New York City, I was at God's Love We Deliver, which delivers meals to people with AIDS who can't cook for themselves. I started collecting all the paperwork for the hours. I actually had 80 hours more than I needed.
Damn.
It was charitable, though. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean it's a good cause, but man, that is crazy.
So I had to gather all this stuff up and give it to Luke so he could get me off the hook. He said, usually you have to go to Florida to appear yourself, but for some reason I didn't have to go. Luke, it was good enough that he was representing me and I wasn't even there, so that was good. And Luke said that was the first time in history of Florida that has happened, where I didn't have to be there.
See, that's a positive though, because you're the only American artist found guilty of obscenity, but at least you got another first also besides that.
I wonder if they're a little embarrassed, partly, But, if I go back just a moment, because I wanted to talk about I was ordered to take a psychiatric evaluation at my own expense and get any treatment deemed necessary by the psychiatrist. So when I went to that first meeting with the psychiatrist, she said, I charge $100 an hour, she says. And she says, well, you come in, we're going to take a test for an hour, like a written test, and I'm going to talk to you. I figured, all right, that's $100. So I go in there, and she has this written test. I noticed they're asking me the same question again and again to see if you answer the same, Stuff like, do you hear voices, you feel like people are after you. I'm like, oh, I kind of do, And then she has a talk with me. So after an hour, it's time to pay, and she says, all right, that'll be $1,000. Is that cash or check? And I said, oh, that's going to be an IOU. At the time, I had like $10,000 in the bank saved up, but I didn't want to spend it. You know, it was very cheap. And I said, well, it was an hour. I thought it was $100 an hour. And she says, well, she spent 9 hours researching the boiled angels, 7 and 8. 9 hours looking at them, you know, reading them, studying them. I mean, I felt like she was just trying to get money out of me because she knew I had to pay, you know.
That
So I
sucks.
didn't
That's
pay for that, and automatically she told on me, and I was in violation of probation practically right away, you know. But I never did pay her, you know. Eventually, she wrote me like a letter. She's like, "Well, you can settle this for $500. It's half price." I'm like, "Nah." Although I would have been interested in hearing her conclusion, you know, what it was, because I did the ink blot test. I did like, and she kind of seemed interested in me. Like she was. I gave her an ink blot answer, and she's like, "Oh, I never got that answer before. That's interesting." And one point she asked me about dreams, you know, and I told her some of the nightmares I had that I feel were directly involved from the case, like police busting me and whatever. And she said, "Oh, well, this has really like been hard on you, hasn't it?" I was like, "Yeah." A little sympathetic, but still to charge me $1,000, you know.
Did you got yeah you went through that is insane. That was like I said, I remember when it was going on, and we
Yeah,
talked about it on this show, and it's unbelievable. Even when you watch the doc or you read about it, it's just crazy, man. But you know, but
yeah,
now you're doing art shows. You've done a bunch of exhibits now. I mean, it really, I guess if you look at the positive of it, like we were saying earlier, it's kind of like when they put the stickers on the records, man. It wound up bringing your name to attention because me and Ed are always taught. Ed doesn't believe, he thinks the system's totally rigged. And this,
hmm,
whenever we talk about this, right, Ed, this is one case where Ed's like, yeah, man, this shit's
yeah,
fucked up, right?
It's garbage.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
It's
Yeah,
unbelievable.
definitely garbage. I mean, you know, it's just I saw it in Florida. I mean, especially in Largo, you know. I mean, there's those places. Do you know Kenneth County? Have you heard of that over by St. Pete?
Mhm.
There's
Kenneth
like
City, where you can
Kenneth
only drive
City.
like 10 streets without getting a speeding ticket.
Yeah,
Everything's
so it's it's 60 miles per hour, maybe 50 miles per hour, and then there's signs you're entering Kenneth City, 30-mile per hour zone.
yeah.
Half a mile, 30 miles
It's
per hour. Every time
it's
we drove through there, you're going to either see the police waiting for someone on both sides or someone pulled over getting a ticket on both sides. And they've probably
that's
been doing this since the old days, you know.
well, it's funny. You say I used to live over there too. I used to work at a place called, you might remember, Don Pablo's was over there by Tyrone Boulevard and
Oh
Park
yeah,
on the crossover. I used to work in that building, and we had to drive through Kansas City. And you always knew that when you went through, you know, we would be high
yeah,
after work smoking joints, or you'd be like,
yeah.
man, you were always like focused.
Oh
You
yeah.
had to like drive like 10 below because
You knew.
Kansas City, they will get you. They will nail you every time. You
Yeah.
know. I mean, they follow you too. That was especially they follow your car through the whole way through Kansas City.
Oh yeah.
It was
Try to
crazy.
intimidate you, you know.
Yeah, that's funny
Um,
because Kansas City's known for that. I mean, that is the thing about that place. You
yeah.
know, I mean, like I can't believe like stuff you went through, man. It's nuts, and I'm glad that we're like that's what we were saying. We said a couple of months ago. We're like, man, we got to see if we can get him on here to talk about this because I feel like a lot of people didn't know about this or had they like it's kind of pushed under the carpet. And we're getting older, so you look now. In the '90s is kind of a far time away, but it's amazing they did that to you because and it's
Yeah.
obviously things are different now. The internet, has changed everything,
Yeah.
but you know yeah, I mean, I don't know how you did it, man, but I'm glad. It's like I said, me and Ed were talking about it, and we both said, well, man, it probably got you, at the end of the day, it got you more known to the world as an artist. Like you said, Merle
Yeah.
Allen's telling you,
Yeah.
hey, man, we don't need your money. I mean, you
Yeah.
know,
I mean, I kind of feel like when I look back at the whole thing that, just being like dumped there at a young age in that kind of place and growing up through the police harassment, which kind of got me ready for the future. By the time they were coming after my art, I was thinking like, well, this is personal. There's no way I'm just going to give in and plead guilty, even though that'd probably be the easiest way to do it.
about what they
Get
wanted.
probation, and that's what they wanted. What they probably thought I would do. Um, But yeah, it's better to fight for what you believe in, certainly. And it's just better that I'm out of there, you know. I mean, I've gone back to visit. Each time I go back to visit, I like look forward to it, and then as soon as I get there, I'm thinking, "Oh, I'm here again."
Yeah, let's get the hell out. Yeah.
Weird feeling. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So no, man, we appreciate you coming on here and telling us, all about it. Well, you have anything coming up? Any exhibits or anything that people can catch you
Um,
at? Or
well, I was going to say about the documentary. You know, we had that for a while on Amazon Prime, and it was getting around there. But really, they want to sell it to a Blu-ray company, so that's why it was taken off Amazon by Frank. You know, I'd rather it still be on there until it got a Blu-ray release, but they're thinking that if it's on Amazon Prime, then maybe the Blu-ray company's not going to want it. I don't know. So hopefully we're going to get a Blu-ray release before long, or we'll get it back on Amazon or something, you know, because really the important thing is to get people to be able to see it, you know.
I definitely know, man. And if you let me know when it's back out again, we'll definitely let people know on this show and stuff. And
Yeah,
and you can always send us any exhibit you're doing, man. Let us know, and we'll mention it
yeah,
and stuff.
definitely.
We appreciate you coming on and give us your time, right, Ed? We've been, like I said, this was a episode that we wanted to do, and we're glad that you actually came on and gave us, one of your nights free.
I'll be out in Indianapolis on I believe it's August 24th. It's called the Dead Formats Convention, which is like a VHS convention. And they brought me out there last year, and it was really good, you know, so I'm going to do that again this year. So if you're around there, if anyone's out there at that time, you know, you can come out there. Um,
And the webpage
Eventually,
again.
it's called Dead Formats, Indianapolis.
And do you have dates on your site too? People could check out for like
Oh,
when you're going
yeah.
to be making
If you
appearances.
go to the website, you can see things I'm doing there. I try to keep all that updated, you know. Um, in October, I'm going somewhere, but I forget now where it is. Somewhere with Frank, you know, because Frank gets invited to conventions and stuff, but he likes to have someone to travel with. So he always recommends me or one of his friends. So if I'll go out there, it'll probably give me a table to sell stuff, you know.
Nice, nice. Probably the horror conventions and stuff, and yeah. So you can check
Yeah.
out your dates. And it's what is it? It's boiled angel dot. What is your exact webpage address again?
Oh, it's called Mike Diana Comics.
Damn it, comics.
But
And
comics
Instagram, you have a page on with the X, right?
with IX.
IX. And you have an Instagram page too. Still, that's official.
Instagram is Mike Diana Boiled.
Boiled.
I had
Mike, man,
another one called Boiled Mike Diana, but I got they deleted it, you know.
oh,
Unfortunately. So this is the new one, Mike Diana Boiled. I figured if my name's first, it'll come up maybe easier. People just put my name.
nice, man. Mike, we really appreciate you again, man, coming on and hanging out with us tonight and
Yeah,
telling us your
definitely.
story. And
It's been a good time.
yeah, man. If you have, like I said, if you have anything going on, just let us know. We'll announce it and stuff, and keep in touch. And like I said, your story is definitely something that people can hear. It's crazy that you got fucking busted for obscenity for your artwork. It's just, you would never
Yeah.
think that this would happen, but it happened to you, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, one of those
You know,
things, you know. I just, yeah. I mean,
welcome to
overall,
Florida.
it's a good experience. You know, it was ended up being a good experience overall in the long run. You know.
No, it's an insane story, man. But Mike, we appreciate you. We're gonna say goodbye to you after we hang up here.
All
Just give
right.
us a minute. And we're going to play on the way out here. Me and Ed will be back in a few minutes. We're going to play the Dwarves Lesbian Nun from the Free Cocaine 1999 record.
Awesome.
Mike, again, man, thanks for hanging out with us tonight.
Yep, definitely. Good to be
Oh
here.
yeah.
Yeah, we
Have a good
appreciate it,
one.
man. And we'll say goodbye to you in a minute, Mike. Everybody else, we'll be back after this song.
Reaching at the drain strip, chewing on a pink slip, riding on a ride, ramping in a god lesbian nun. Yeah, Superman Grace. I took a week and
that was the Dwarves with Lesbian Nun off the 1991 record Free Cocaine, that came out on Recess Records. Ed, man, Mike Diana, what can you say, man? That is a hell of a story. I'm glad he told it here, and I'm glad that people get to hear it because I really think there's a lot of people who probably younger people than us that weren't around for that whole trial, and it was all back then. It was on Channel 44 News. In Tampa Bay, it was like a big thing. The
It was
newspapers.
because, and my cousin, if I remember correctly, she was going to Gainesville. She was a Gator. Now she lives in Orlando, but she went to Florida.
University where
Yeah, she went to UF, and I
the
remember going,
Gainesville
"Wow,
Ripper was his nickname. Actually,
yep,
that dude, piece of shit. I
yep,
mean, just.
piece of shit." But
Yeah.
yeah, this dude was definitely he was very forthcoming with the information, and he didn't hold back. So I'm glad, and he wasn't. It wasn't anything crazy that
No, it's
and
just
he
the
just told the
truth.
story.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, like I said, he's still doing art. He's done a bunch of which we talked about during the interview. He's done album covers for Autopsy, Horror, a bunch of bands. He does for punk bands. He's done film posters.
His
Um,
the story of him at the airport. If that cop hadn't
yeah,
left, and he said he got a close call, that was
you can imagine. I was thinking when he was telling us that, I was like, man, that's that would you could just picture. You think you're going to jail
I'm
when that
I'm
happens.
getting taken out in handcuffs, but
Yeah. Well,
this dude gets away.
he was sneaking back to see his mom and stuff like that, and I thought that was
I don't
really
know
cool
if I
with
would
the.
have taken a plane, like
Yeah, that's
personally,
risky. You can
because that's
drive. It's
risky.
not like Europe. Yeah.
The chances you getting pulled over if you're not looking like you're in a drug van with smoke coming out of the windows, you know what I mean? There's so many cars on the road, it would be really hard for somebody to pick you out of a on the highway. You're coming through planes, you're using your passport, like he was saying, or even an ID. If you're on a list, once they run that name, you could be popped. I mean, that's the easiest way to get popped. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean,
But
I
yeah,
think he has a hell of. I mean, you think about it, like he is. I mean, he's the only dude, like what, the only American artist found guilty of obscenity charges. I
yep.
mean, just for drawing, you just wouldn't believe it's true. I think that we talked with him about it too. I think that when they couldn't get him for the murder because he was innocent when they took his blood and stuff, his DNA, they wanted to get him for something.
They
You
had to
know,
hem him up on some
yeah, they
charges.
had to have him up for something, and I think that was their thing. And now you couldn't. Now he wouldn't get. It wouldn't happen now. There was. You think about it.
Well,
There's no internet really. Nobody knows what's going on. It's there's like this thing they were doing, and for him it was like. And I thought what the most crazy thing was is that when he was going to court and stuff like that, even though he was innocent of the murders and stuff, that they always linked him, like even the St. Pete Times, it was like um, Gainesville murder suspect, even though he was already cleared from it. They
right.
always included that on the
They had to add that
newspapers and the
tag, that
news.
slug line on the end to make him look like a piece of shit.
Yeah, like
No,
just fuck with him, I
yeah,
mean, and then he, then they did that, and if you think they handed out the comp, like basically they wouldn't allow him to like turn in his comic book collection of underground comics so he can show that this is a normal thing in this world. But they also handed each drawer a boiled angel so they could see how offensive it is to shock them all. I mean, it's
right.
that's just hey,
It's
well,
a tactic, man. That's a scumbag tactic. I mean,
yeah, he was on.
I hope I'm never in that position.
Do you remember Midnight Blue with Al Goldstein out of Manhattan? It was the old cable
Yeah,
channel in New York. He was on that
yeah.
too. I remember it like '95 when he got back in New York, and God, that was old Al Goldstein. I don't know what happened with him. I haven't heard of him in a long time, but um, that was the Manhattan cable television channel he was on, and he was on that, and he was like we said, we were talking with him about like Playboy contacted him and did something on him. MTV tried to get a hold of him.
And you
You
won't
know,
find it anywhere.
no, and I tell you what the fuck, yeah, you're right, because I looked for a lot of Deanna shit, and I tell you, man, they pulled a lot of stuff off the net. It's almost like this dirty secret that Florida doesn't want you to know about, and that was one thing that's crazy. And me and you always talk off the air. We both have our thoughts on certain things, but it just seems very suspicious to me the way they just kind of try to. I don't think they want people to know what they did to this guy. But like I said to him, I said, Mike, I don't know if they didn't do this to you, it probably helped out your career at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, yeah. His name would never have been known. I mean, because an underground comic, unless he, like branched out, maybe who knows? You could have been
You
part of
never know.
Marvel
Yeah.
later on down the line, But this definitely, I mean, going through that kind of crap to get to that point sucks. But hey, man, you got to, if you're going to tell your story so people can see how you were treated, man, more power to you. That's what
Yeah.
I say.
No,
Because
and I appreciate him coming on, man.
absolutely,
We have a lot of music guests on here. We have some horror guests, but our show is kind of all over the place. We like it like that. We don't want to just be pigeonholed into one thing. We want the punk artist on, the metal artist, the horror, actors, the horror producers. We have no rules here. We kind of, if someone's got a story to tell, we find it interesting. We bring them on, man, and we
hell
appreciate
yeah,
everybody.
I got Loose Lips McGee coming in from the B-rated strip club down the road next week, so that'll
There
be
you
fun
go.
for us.
We got
You
stripper.
know,
Yeah, we got a whole deal. We if you got something, that we want to hear, we're gonna bring you on, and especially we try to kind of do the whole Tampa related sometimes, and the whole St. Petersburg thing. So Mike fit that whole thing. We like I said we talked about him back in the Tampa Bay Metal Awards. When it came to Susie Morbid because they were engaged at one time and stuff. So but yeah, definitely appreciate Mike coming on. And like I said, we have shit, man. Ed, you got the show coming up this weekend, like we told everybody at the beginning of the show. Monstrosity with Nasty Savage, Whiplash, Dismember, Wicked Angel, and a bunch more in San Antonio on the 16th and 17th. We got Tomas from Wolfheart coming on the 28th. We got Henry from God Dethroned on August 20th. And who knows what else will happen. There's other stuff I've put out there. We just don't announce it till we get it. Ed's going to be getting cut up a little bit. But Ed, we're glad you're still with us, man. And, it's we appreciate everybody who listens to our show, right, man? Because it's really
yeah,
people have been writing in. We
absolutely.
appreciate anybody. Feel free. We've been getting a lot of emails and stuff like that. Feel free to write us whenever you want, man. We appreciate it. If there's bands you want us to try to get on the show, let us know, man. You never know. Like, we we're
Like and
kind of,
subscribe. We got to
yeah,
do that now. We got to just be
yeah,
those
we
people.
do. Like
Man,
and
we need you to hit that
subscribe.
subscribe button, man. We need to hit that subscribe button.
Don't you
Throw
hate
some
that though? But
stars. Like, what was it on Facebook? We need you to give us some stars, and we got to get on Twitch so they can give us some bits, and
yeah, it's crazy. I always hear them
have
doing
people
that. I'm always
paying
like,
our.
maybe we're doing something wrong, me and Ed, because we don't ever say that. But
Listen,
I,
listen. You live in Lithuania. You need to be driving a Ferrari. We need some bits, people. We need some
yeah, we need
stars.
some
We
stuff,
need you to
man.
go to our Patreon that we haven't done yet. And what's the other Cash App and Venmo? We're gonna do it all, and because I need to be driving a Raptor. My F-150 isn't cool enough. I need a Raptor.
I did get a couple of complaints that we don't do live Instagram, but we will again. It's just hard. We're freaking.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. If I can make it happen this weekend, I will. Because
I'll
this is
wake up
different
for
than
it, man.
this is a
I'll wake up
different.
for it.
I don't know if this is a two-stage festival. I'll know when we're supposed to be practicing tomorrow, or sometime this week. And practice. I don't even know what that means, but we will be practicing for the show, and I will talk to Lee because I think Lee's done this before or he's been there, so I'll know. And there are backstage areas, from my understanding, not like the problem with festivals like Maryland is if you're playing that day, you only get the backstage area for so long because then they got a whole day's worth of shit, and like each stage only has like the where we stayed, they only had three, and one of them the air was broken, so they didn't want anybody in there dying. They put fans in there. I saw later on there were some like crew people in there sitting, but when we walked by it, you could feel the heat coming out of the room, and I was like, well, thanks, because we wound up actually um, hanging out with another band, which was fine. I don't care because we were just in two different areas, but yeah, so they kick you out, but here you're there for the day. I think they do different dressing rooms. So, and if I do run into somebody, like I do know three or four of the dudes in Nasty Savage. Um, Actually, I know everybody in Nasty Savage now. I didn't even think
Yeah, you
about
got
that.
Orman, you got freaking Nasty
Even
Ronnie, who I
Pete,
saw Vixen
Pete
Trail.
and
He had
Dave
him on.
Orman were
Pete.
in Contorted when I was,
Yeah,
when we did Contorted together, and Jim Coker. So that's three Contorted dudes
yeah.
in so yeah, it should be pretty cool. And if I could get on there and do an Instagram, obviously I'll let you know in advance because I know you're
Yep.
gonna have to get up early, but we'll
That's
do
no
it.
problem. I'll do
We'll
it,
do it.
man.
We can do a 20-minute, 30-minute, and who knows, you might even maybe I'll let you guys talk to Mark Van Erp, and that'll change your
Yeah, we should
aspect
get
of wanting
Mark
to
on
do
the
it live.
show eventually. Definitely.
We
I
will.
told you that
No, we
before.
will.
Yeah.
We will. I've already talked to him. Actually, each guy in Monstrosity, believe it or not, because they've all done different things. Even Sam, Sam Molina's
Yep.
going with us on this trip because Justin's busy. He did Terrorizer. He was in Monstrosity in the early days. He did a few other bands because he lives in Fort Myers. So he's been around. You know what I mean? A lot of these guys have done shit. Matt, he has a couple bands that he plays with in Alabama. He was on one of the Diabolic records where he played all the guitars. He wasn't really in the band. He just did the record. So yeah, I mean, we got guys that have their own projects that would be awesome for an interview. It's just I try not to. We have other people we're trying to get on, and I don't want to come close to the vest because I don't want people saying, "Oh, see, he's just getting his friends on." Like Rick, I could get Rick Roz and Terry Butler, but I'm waiting. Because obviously
Definitely get
they're on
those
tour
guys on.
anyway.
Like, yeah,
But yeah, I
they
mean,
got.
these are guys that I can promise you when we do get them on, their stories will be just like everybody else's. It will be awesome, captivating. I mean, I could only imagine talking to 2 hours with Rick Ross because
Yeah, I'm sure there's
I,
definitely some
I've talked to
stories.
Rick Ross for 2 hours and I can tell you he's a very interesting cat.
Yeah.
So doing it for an interview where you're going through his history will be killer. So yeah, no, we'll do it.
Yeah, no, and as always, everyone, we appreciate everyone listening. I mean, like I said, we've been doing this for a year now. This is our 56th episode, and our episodes, I feel like we put a lot into them. So I think that you can always go back and listen to them. And yeah, we'll be back. So we're gonna be back next week. So
Yep.
we try to do one a week. So pretty much that's our goal. And Ed, I hope you have a blast in Texas. I'll be talking to you through that, event. And again, Mike Diana, we appreciate him coming on tonight. Yeah. Ed, anything else you could think of? First of all, I guess give the spiel.
Yeah. Find us on Spotify, Apple, anywhere podcasts are streamed, YouTube. We do have a Facebook page. Instagram is key for us, probably more so for getting with us. And
We
then
don't buy ads on Facebook, so we have no pull on
yeah,
Facebook.
no. And then the TampaMorgue at gmail.com for any communication that you want with us. We answer your stuff. And if you send questions or comments or suggestions, we definitely check them out.
Yeah, and everybody, we appreciate you. We'll be back next week on the Tampa Morgue. As I said, if you're in Texas, say hello to Ed. He'll be there. And everybody else, man, thanks for listening to another episode of the Tampa Morgue, and we'll see you next week. Peace.
See ya.